Hello, and welcome to another episode of Red Dot Forum Camera Talk. As always, I am David Farkas. I'm joined by Josh Lehrer.
Hey, everybody.
Over there in the little box down there. There he is. Is Jose Rivera producing the show. And moderating the chat, we have Lorena. So everyone say hello to Lorena, and I'm sure she'll type hello back. So tonight we have a follow-up episode and also a continuation episode.
Yes.
So we are following up on the Q3 introduction video that we did a couple months back. Mm-hmm. We did promise that we'd come back with an in-depth firmware walkthrough.
Menu walkthrough?
Menu walkthrough, not firmware. Menu walkthrough, now that there is new firmware. And we are here to do that. And this is actually, I think, the fourth part of our menu walkthrough series, which are just handy-dandy resources to have so you can set up the camera the way that we would set it up, or certainly we'll give you our best suggestions to get the most out of your camera and what everything actually does.
Yeah, I mean, we've done Q2, M11, SL2, and when we were sort of looking at our schedule of upcoming shows with the year being more than half over,
It is.
we knew we wanted to do a Q3 menu episode, and we were trying to figure out when we could slot it in. And with the new firmware that just came out, like David said, we felt this would be a good time. I think something to remember is that these shows live on the channel forever.
They do.
So even if you're still waiting for a Q3, like a lot of people are, when you do eventually get yours, just go back and watch this episode, sit with us for however long, 2-hour show, and it'll be a very, very good resource to navigate all of your menus and settings. And I think almost like an accelerated path to getting the most out of the camera.
I think so.
Because you're not having to figure a lot of that stuff out through trial and error.
We're figuring it out for you.
That's right. Well, that's the hope anyway. Although I feel like we always end up learning something from the viewers when we do
Absolutely.
these
Absolutely.
shows.
But I actually learned something from some little snippets that you gleaned from the instruction manual.
Yeah, there is a thing.
There is a thing called the instruction
Called
manual.
the instruction manual, yes.
It does exist, not in paper form.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore. But we are here to walk through. So I've got a Q3.
I've got a Q3. And before we start, we should talk. I know we have some news we're going to talk about at different times.
Yeah, we'll introduce that stuff.
We want to do that at one part now and then another part like a little later. You want to do it all at once later?
I think we'll just do it all at once later.
Okay. So stay tuned
yep.
for around maybe an hour from now. We're going to talk about some different things happening in the Leica world that you'll definitely want to be tuned in on. So
Absolutely.
sneak peek.
And if you have specific questions about the Q3 menu options, recommended settings that maybe we're not getting into, or you just want to kind of get ahead of that, drop them in the comments. We've got Jose and Lorena keeping an eye on those while we blabber on about the menus here.
Yes, because certainly we may do something that you say that's, well, wait a minute, I have found a much better way or much whatever. We want to know.
We do want to know.
Yeah, we actually do like hearing these things. So
Because we learn sometimes too.
I know, it's crazy.
It's
That's
amazing.
crazy. But, usually I try to give the instruction manual a good peruse before we do one of these shows just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And it is available on Leica's website. If you go to support and then sort of filter through the different systems, you could download it. And what's nice is the PDF file for the manual also lists the firmware version that it is applicable to. So as they add features in firmware, they'll change or amend the manual so it has whatever they've added to it, and then that's reflected in the title. So for example, now it's 1.2, which is important to mention that if you want to walk through and make sure what you're seeing is exactly what we're seeing, you want your Q3 to be on firmware 1.2.
Which we should mention, just in case you haven't seen our previous episode that we talked about it, I am just going to show this briefly because it is also a valuable resource as we're talking about different cameras, not just the Q3. So what I'm showing you here, let me maximize that. Under, in Red Dot Forum, under More and Technical Articles, as you can see there, we have the firmware master list. And that breaks down by every single system and every single Leica digital camera ever made. And it's...
Well, not ever made. Everyone that has had a firmware update. So, because there's some on here that have never had updates.
Which one hasn't had a firmware update?
Well, like the Digilux 2 is on here.
Okay. Fine.
The last
ones where you
15 years or so.
Ones that you can actually user load a firmware that they haven't, which is 90-something% of them.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So all you have to do is scroll through the list here, find your camera, and you can just click on that firmware and it will download on your computer. Handy dandy. And then if there's any particular release notes about it, we'll have it here. So for instance, the Leica Q3 has version 1.2, and it was released August 4th, 2023. And if you click here, you can actually see what was done. This is just some bug fixes.
Yeah.
But that's it.
But more importantly is that David's update articles have instructions on how to do the firmware update as well.
Exactly.
If he scrolls, well,
Yep.
it's gone
Yeah,
down,
you
but
can go back.
When you scroll down, you can see that he demonstrates. Oh, there it is. That
There
he
it is.
breaks down the instructions as
Installations.
well. And we update this. Well, David updates this continuously. So as new firmware becomes available, it gets stuck here in this on this article. So you should definitely bookmark it so you're always up to date. Because certainly, as I've said a million times, having firmware current is something that you are paying for when you buy your camera, because you're not just buying the hardware, you're paying for the future R&D that goes into adding features, fixing bugs, and improving the user experience. So things to keep in mind.
For sure.
But without further ado, we should start.
Yes.
Sweet. Okay, so we've got our super cool overhead cameras, which I will attempt to not shake the table too much. We have to remember.
Oh, right, right.
Yes,
No shaking of the table.
yeah, so like whenever one of us is showing, we have to remember not to like
Hands off.
all that coffee we drink. It's bad. So I think the first thing we should do is I'm going to bring the camera to factory defaults.
Okay.
If you want to do this with me, you can, just so your camera starts the same way ours does. Obviously, if you have yours dialed in just right, don't feel like you need to. But if I pull up my camera here, here we are. Is that sharp? I can't tell. Yes, no? Yeah, I think so.
I think you got it good.
Yeah, pretty good.
There. That's better.
Better? Okay,
Yeah.
let me just put something underneath. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, so I've got that, I just turned the camera on. I'm going to hit menu. I'm going to go to my user profiles, which is that little head and shoulders icon. And I'm going to simply pick the default profile. And essentially what this is doing is it's resetting the camera to factory default. The difference between this and actually going and doing a reset is that you don't have to change the time and the date and the language and all that stuff all over again. You don't go through that whole sort of boot up process. So this is a much faster way of bringing the camera to factory defaults. And it, of course, retains all your other user profiles. If you had any in there, it doesn't get rid of them. So now the camera is in factory default. David, you want to walk us through kind of what the first thing that they see is when they hit the menu button?
Usually fingerprints.
I just cleaned yours.
Well, I know, but I'm walking through with you, so.
You're killing me.
All right.
You can see this camera's already been quite well used. I blame this guy.
Okay.
All right, David. Now I'm going to kick it over to you. Talk to us about what this screen is and how it works, please.
Sure. So this is going to be your quick. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go.
You got it.
Thanks. Okay.
I'm going to take my hands off there.
This is your basic interface that you see. So I'm going to clear that. So that's your live view, and you just click menu here. This takes you into your yeah. That's because
if that happens, that's the eye sensor. We will address that when we get to that part of it.
Okay. So you can see here now at the top, you can see it's in 28 millimeter because that's the lens that's on there, which I think is funny. We've got a full battery. This one actually does not have a memory card.
I told you like seven times to put a card in there before the show started.
Even though you told me to put a memory card in.
I wanted mine because I came prepared.
I know. Here we go.
David, you're just making a scene. You're disturbing my dog.
I know. Here we go.
So
I'm going to put a memory card in, but it's good to see what it looks like with no memory card, right?
Sure.
Because there's an interesting and notable exception to the M11 and the M11 monochrome.
Other way.
Thank you. The M11 and the M11 monochrome have internal memory. The Q3 does not. So now you can see I've got 675 pictures remaining.
There you go.
And a full battery. The next thing you'll see here is photo and video. I saw already a question about, I switch into video a lot. Well, if you just tap this, you'll notice there's a white background with audio levels and a little camera icon here. So this is your video menu interface, and this is your photo interface. You can also switch by accident by swiping. You'll notice now it's in video because I've swiped from the left side to the right side. If I swipe from the right side to the left side, it goes back to photo.
This is what gets people the most.
This gets people all the time.
Yeah.
Also on the SL.
Yeah.
But the fastest way, if you can't figure out the swiping, is just click menu. And if it's in video by accident like that, just go to photo. Okay? Easy peasy. The next one down is either your exposure meter or exposure compensation, depending on what mode you're in. Because we set this one back to factory defaults, and it is on A on the aperture and A on the shutter speed dial, that means that we are in program mode. Personally, I like aperture priority mode. So I'm going to select an aperture, let's just say f4. And now we have switched into A mode. So on other cameras like the SL2 or the SL2S, this would actually be selectable. When you click this, it just says PASM. That means that it's the auto selector telling you program, aperture, shutter priority, or manual. And then you have all these other scene modes, which you can use.
We don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
We just leave it on PASM. But don't be confused if you say, I can't switch into manual. The reason is kind of obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious. To be in manual, you have to manually set your aperture. You have to manually set your shutter speed. With those two variables set, now you can see we are now in manual mode. Okay, so personally, for most of my shooting, I do prefer aperture priority, so I'm going to leave it in that.
Cool.
And then you'll notice that it says F4. Again, wow, I keep...
There you go. You got it.
It says F4. Again, that is just a readout. I can't change that from the screen because we have a mechanical control for aperture on the Q. So as I'm turning the aperture ring, you'll notice that the aperture value is changing on screen. And my shutter speed is changing because it is metering based on aperture priority. If I put it into full manual, we can now see that readout here. Now, there's a notable exception, right, Josh? When we want to go to a longer exposure, you'll notice we're in the 1+, and we can get, and now adjust
Other way.
this way. I am sorry for the crookedness. I'm going to move my chair.
Just tilt your head slightly to the
There
left.
we go.
That's all.
Now, if you turn the dial or touch the screen, we can change that all the way down to, well, T, but
It's 120
120 seconds is a maximum on the
Yeah.
Q3.
So this is a question we get sometimes because there's no bulb position on the shutter speed dial. Is how do I get to the longer exposures?
That's it.
Simply turn the shutter speed dial to the 1+ setting and then kick over to the back screen, tap on the shutter speed, and you can use that slider to pick anything from 1 all the way to 120 seconds, or T mode, which basically is you hit the shutter to start the exposure,
Counts.
and then you hit it again to stop the exposure, up to also still the limit of 120 seconds.
If you don't click to end it, it will automatically end itself at 120 seconds.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So
Back to the screen.
back. Here we go. Now,
Nice.
there we go. So I'm not going to do that, but you'll notice, as Josh said, it actually goes to 0.6 seconds for some reason, even though it's on
Well, the reason it does that
1+.
is because we'll get to this later, but the control. I'm going like this because I don't want my arms on the table. It's like, why does he mad? But the only way to keep my elbows off the table when he's showing the screen because it gets so shaky.
It does.
Sorry. The way to access the third stops is by using that control screen there. So if you want to shoot somewhere between one of the click stops on the shutter speed dial, that's where you do it, and it's both directions.
Right. I'll show that as well.
So the fact that he's on 1 second means he also has access to the third stop less and a third stop more. That's why it does.
Which is another little secret, because unless you read the instruction manual, you probably wouldn't know that.
There you go.
So now, if we take a look at that, I would demonstrate. So I'm going to turn to, let's say, 2/50th of a second right here. Flip it on over. And now that control, when we click the shutter speed increment, gotta want it, you'll see that in the middle, straight in the middle is going to be 250th. And I can go a third slower to 200th, a third slower than that to 160th. So that's minus 2/3 from base. Or if we go plus a third, it's 3/20th, and plus 2/3 is 400th.
Well, that's actually minus 2/3.
But mine
I know you're backwards, but yeah.
faster, yes.
Sorry.
It's faster, right. So, and then if I switch to 500th, now I'm back to the middle. And again, I can range from 3/20th to 800.
This is really handy if you're trying to match exposures from different cameras, or if you just want to get really specific
precise
shutter speed. I can't say I use this a lot, but it's certainly nice to know that it's there.
And the reality is, when you're using aperture priority, the camera is doing this for you anyway.
Correct.
Right. It's not locking you to full shutter speed values. That's only if you are in either manual or shutter priority.
There we go. Cool. That's a good tip, though.
Yep.
Thank you, David. All right.
For sure. Keep it moving.
Keep going. We
All
got
right.
so much to discuss.
All right.
Got to move it down.
Thank you.
you
And
go.
then next up, we have the ISO. Right now, we're in auto ISO. And here we can easily go into auto by clicking the A, or you can turn the wheel
Other way.
the other way. And here we are going all the way from 50 all the way up to a maximum of 100,000. Couple recommendations here. Don't use 100,000 and don't use 50.
There you go.
So the true base ISO of this camera is not 50, it is actually 100. 50 is a pull setting, meaning that you are sacrificing image quality, giving up a stop at dynamic range, clipping your highlights in order to have a slower shutter speed. When you absolutely positively need it, we would highly recommend sticking to a base ISO of 100 for bright daylight shooting. And in terms of a maximum for the Q3, we're going to be testing this more, but just in my personal experience, I think that 12,500 is probably going to be your realistic maximum. And if you can keep that 6,400 or under, it's going to be the maximum image quality. So basically 100 to 6,400. And if you really need it, 12,500. Those other ones are there for make-believe.
No.
They're there for a reason.
Extreme situations where you might need the extra light
I know,
gathering.
because you're going to say it.
Yes, because
What are
I'll
you gonna
always
say?
take a grainy photo over
There
a
it
blurry
is.
photo. So you know what? If I have to go to 25,000 to get the shot, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
Sorry,
But this is a point of confusion. A lot of people see that ISO 50 and say, okay,
Right.
that's best quality, right?
Right.
And it's also more confusing because if you look at the M11, that has an actual true base ISO of 64, which does give you the highest image quality. And there is no pull setting. And then when we get to the Q3, we've got the pull setting again. But it doesn't say pull 50
Right.
like the cameras used to. Now it just says 50. So it's like, whatever.
I mean, the reality is probably because the sensor is so capable, even the slight compromise of ISO 50 is still quite high performance. So Leica probably decided semantics.
I mean, I guess realistically, if we're looking at a base ISO performance of 14 stops at dynamic range,
exactly.
we're going to be getting 13 stops, which is certainly no slouch.
Yeah.
And let's say that you're in a low contrast scene in the woods with a overcast day with a waterfall, and you don't have an ND filter, ISO 50.
Yeah, if you need to, it's available. So
Yeah, it's available.
All right. So why don't you finish on that row, and then I'll take over. And we'll switch a
Absolutely.
little
Yep.
bit.
Okay, so next up, we just have EV, which is exposure compensation. And you can access it through here, again, using the touch screen. You can see these values go down -3 to +3. I did it. I switched it over.
It happened. There are other ways to access this, which we'll talk
There
about
are,
as
yeah.
we get to the menu.
This is just the menu method. And I can use the thumb wheel here, or I could also use the direction pad. So we've got a couple different ways that we can access it. Touchscreen, thumb wheel, direction pad.
Yes.
And generally speaking, though, you can also access it,
Yeah.
say,
but
just
we'll get
right,
there when we
just from the wheel.
when we get into the menu. So
But we're going to get into
we're
that.
not there yet.
Okay, so
So-
that is your basic photo, video, exposure compensation, shooting modes. And now Josh is going to dive in a little bit to
Correct.
our autofocus and metering settings.
So, what I'm going to do is actually bounce around a little bit, not in a way that will make sense in a second, because the way that I want to go through the menu is linear, top to bottom. And if I were to do it by using these sort of quick icons here, we would be bouncing around the menu quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what each one of these icons does, but I'm not going to explain the setting until we actually get to it in the main menu, because that way I can go sort of top to bottom in a linear, hopefully clear fashion. But just so you guys know, this clip right here will be a bit of a reference for what all of these buttons do. So the top left, we have our IAF default, which is our autofocusing mode. Next to that, we have our AF field size, meaning the size of the autofocus point. Next to that, we have our drive mode. Next to that, we have our JPEG profiles, depending on what we want to shoot. Next to that, we have our user profiles. I'm currently in the default standard profile. The second row, starting at the left, we have our metering modes. Next, we have our white balance. Next, we have our file size, so you can choose DNG, JPEG, or a combination of both. And the last one we have is our Wi-Fi setting, or Leica FOTOS, to connect to an iOS or Android device. And the very last icon brings you into the main menu. So if I tap on that, that takes us here. And here is where I really want to get into what all the different settings do. So we'll probably take this page by page.
Sure.
Do you want the first page, or want me to take the first page?
I'll take the first page.
Okay, cool. So what David's going to do is he's going to go through the menu starting at page 1. We've covered so far the quick menu. Some of the things in that quick access menu, David will reiterate in the main menu because there's a different way to get to them. But if there's questions in the chat or anything I will interrupt him. I'm good at that. And he will address them. So
let me grow your lens cloth one more time.
Yeah, I'll keep it in the middle. I know it's going to get a little
gosh, I know. That's the problem with touchscreens is
I know. They get a little
always have one of these handy. This is a great way to keep the smudgies off of your screen.
Yeah.
Always kept a clean microfiber cloth. They come a myriad of uses. Okay. So in the main menu, you'll see we have page 1. And just another quick little tip, to page through the menu, if you just click the menu button right here, you will go through the various pages of the menu.
Including the quick menu.
Including this quick menu. And if you have favorites set up, favorites as well. That's the little icon that's next to it. And we don't have any favorites set up at the moment.
We don't play favorites here.
Wow.
Yes. Been saving that one.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's been in the arsenal. Waiting. Anyway, carry on.
All right.
Carry on.
All right. So main menu, page 1. These are kind of just bread and butter settings that everyone's going to want to access. And most of these are accessible from that quick menu, the touchscreen menu. But let's go through each one here. So in drive menu.
Drive mode.
In drive mode menu.
Thank you.
Here we go. We've got single, continuous, of various speeds, interval shooting, and bracketing. What's really nice on the Q3 that was missing on other cameras is, for instance, on the SL2, it just says continuous low, continuous medium, continuous high. Well, what does that mean? Well, here they actually tell you the capabilities of each one of these settings, which is like they need to update the other cameras to do this, because continuous here is 2 frames per second. And it's also showing you that you're getting a true 14-bit capture with autofocus capability while shooting. So it's autofocusing as it's shooting. That's an important note as we go through these. We now have continuous at 4 frames per second, also 14-bit, also autofocus capable. Once you go beyond that to 7 frames per second, we're still shooting at 14-bit quality, but autofocus is now disabled. So if you manually focused it, it will retain your focus point for the entire sequence, whether or not your subject moves. If you're using the 2 or 4 frames per second settings, if you enable, let's say, IAF, which we'll go over after this, or face and body detection, you'll see that it will actually track a human or animal subject in between shooting. So you can get a whole sequence of frames at up to 4 frames per second.
Yeah, this is important because if you're photographing something that's moving either laterally or especially towards you, you might think, oh, I should put it in the fastest drive mode because I want to get the best moment. If you do anything faster than 4 frames per second, your focus will not change in between each picture. Meaning if your subject is moving towards you, they'll only be in focus in the beginning and then will immediately fall out of focus. So you want to use the 2 or 4 frames per second mode so that in between each frame, the camera will continue to autofocus.
Now, where it could come in handy, let's say you have a non-moving, at least not laterally or front and back towards you.
Yeah.
Let's say the subject is remaining stationary in a spot, but things are happening and you're not sure. So for instance, let's say that you have a kid jumping off a high dive. The diving board is not moving. They are going to be in the same plane of focus as they go on that diving board and off the diving board into the water. But you want to capture that whole sequence at higher speed than 4 frames per second, let's say 7 frames per second. That's totally fine. You're going to lock focus onto that diving board, squeeze the shutter down, and you're going to get that whole sequence, and it'll all be in focus. If the child is running towards you, you want to use...
Well, you should run away, first of all. If
run away.
A dangerous child is running towards you. So anyway, but this is really important because, as David said and summed up really nicely, the older cameras did not tell you that.
No.
So if you didn't bother to read the manual, shame on you, first of all. But secondly, you may be doing these bursts and wondering why all your pictures, except for the first one, are out of focus. So things to keep in mind.
things to keep in mind. So
Can you quickly explain what bitrate means?
Well, this is a bit rate, but he means
No, not bit
this
rate.
is bit depth.
This is bit
well,
depth.
that's not Jose saying that. That's a question he said.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So this is bit depth of the file. So 14-bit capture is a higher quality capture than say 12-bit. You're getting more tonality that's per channel. It's definitely not a 14-bit image because it's not
the simple version is the more bits, the better.
generally.
But the camera has to work harder to give you that file.
Right.
So as it's having to churn through more images, it's going to reduce performance slightly to do so. I mean, it's negligible, but
negligible. I mean, 12-bit capture is still really good.
yeah, it's still a really good sensor. So.
Yeah. For instance, what you end up with, let's say on your screen that sRGB is 8-bit per channel. So even capturing 12-bit per channel is still going to be a lot higher quality than you generally will need. But the more bits that you have, the more gradation, generally speaking, the more malleable the files will be for editing, for post-processing. So
Ben is saying that we're riveting. No one's ever called me riveting before on the YouTube.
okay.
Love it.
Cool. I love it. Okay.
All right, carry on.
We're laying down the facts.
That's right.
All right. So as we go up, 9 frames. Oh, there we are. Yep. 9 frames per second. That's 12-bit capture, as we just talked about, with no autofocus. And then we've got 15 frames per second. And that is the fastest that the camera will shoot. So it's not quite as quick as, say, an SL2S that'll shoot up to 20 frames per second. But it's still pretty fast. That is a lot of photos if you keep this shutter button pressed. Generally speaking, I don't tend to go over, say like 4 to 7 frames per second because otherwise it's just a lot of pictures coming out. And then interval shooting is really cool. I have a kind of a secret use for this, but let me just show you how this works.
Well, we've talked about it like 10 times.
We have.
We can talk about it again, but
we
I'm
should
saying,
talk about it again.
Yeah, I'm just saying. It's not
So I'm going to give my
not that
example,
secret
and then
anymore.
Josh is going to give his example.
Okay, good.
So this has 3 variables, which is number of frames. So right now it's going to shoot 300. You may not want to do that. So the easy way to edit this, just use the touchscreen. And let's say I want to shoot 20 pictures. Easy peasy. The interval, let's say 2 seconds apart. That's fine. With a 3-hour countdown. No, with a 10-second countdown. Now, why would I do 20 frames with an interval of 2 seconds apart each frame with a countdown of 10 seconds? The reason is this is awesome for group photos. So instead of just setting self-timer and then running like a maniac to get in the photo, and then you're like, okay, hold on, everybody, I got to go check this. No, just use interval shooting. This is the magic for group shooting that you want to be in because you get a 10-second delay to get in the shot. If you're slower than that, set it to 15. If you're like, whatever you're comfortable with. And I find a 2-second delay is great for people to kind of change pose. 20 frames is usually good to get one good one of everybody out of the 20. And then everyone gets to go their merry way and you're all good. So this is my super secret way of shooting group photos. The probably more practical use for interval shooting is also if you want to do a time lapse. So if you did want to shoot, say, 1,000 frames, a minute apart, all night, and you have like or all day. Let's say you have sunrise to sunset. That's how you would set this up, and then you can animate those frames in your video editor of choice.
There you go.
Josh, do you have any other suggestions for interval?
Yeah, so what I use interval for is custom self-timers. The camera has a 2-second or a 12-second self-timer. Sometimes I find 2 seconds is too short, but 12 seconds is just agonizing. So if you set, if we can go to my view here, thank you.
I'll take my hands off.
Thank you. If you set the, here we go, interval to 1 frame, the countdown, the interval, the second setting is irrelevant, right? Because that's how many seconds in between each frame. In this case, it's only 1. The countdown, which is, for the sake of this interval setting, how long the camera waits until it takes the first frame, the countdown becomes your self-timer. So if I want a 5-second self-timer, I simply set the number of frames to 1 and my countdown to 5 seconds. Here we go. And now I have a 5-second self-timer. I can have it as long or as short as I want. If you have a 1200 millimeter lens with a 2x teleconverter on it and it's windy and you want to make it a 30-second self-timer, you can do it. Anything you want with the interval shooting setting.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, back to you.
Okay. So we're going to go back in the menu here. And then last up in the drive mode is exposure bracketing, which is super useful if you are shooting landscape images that are beyond the dynamic range of the camera. So as we talked about previously, the Q3 has a very impressive and very capable 14 stops of dynamic range. Sometimes that's not enough if you have let's say an unobstructed, so no clouds, sun right in the image where you're shooting sunrise or sunset and everything, and you're shooting right into the sun. So you're definitely going to need more than that. And here in the bracketing, we can set it up, number of frames. You could do 3 or 5, as you can see here. You can do exposure bracket steps. So it defaults to 1, which I find not adequate. Because the camera has such good dynamic range, I find that 2 stops works really well. And then exposure compensation, this will actually carry over from your overall exposure compensation that you're currently using. But we could also set it here. So if you wanted to set this, you're basically, and you can see it's a really good graphical representation down at the bottom. And you can see the whole scale is being biased. So let's say that I go -3 exposure compensation. I'm going to take 1 shot here at 1 stop over. Oh, this is 5 shots. Change that to 3. Okay, so 3. So now with -3 EV, what it's doing is moving the standard shot to -3. Then it's doing a -1 because that's your over, and it's doing a -5 because that's your under from your baseline. Hopefully that makes some sense. It's easier to see at 0. And automatic means that when you press the shutter once, it will fire the whole sequence. If you set this to off, you have to push to expose each one, which
A lot of extra work.
I can't think of a reason to ever use that, so I leave this to on.
I mean, you could use that if, let's say, it's really windy and you want to wait for the wind to die down between each bracketed shot.
That's a good.
I could see that
true.
being a good example,
Right.
Because maybe you want to
Trees
be
blowing.
maybe you want to be in control of when it's firing.
Sure.
But limited use case.
Limited use case, yeah. So what that's going to enable you to do, so let's say we have 2 stops with 3 frames. What you're doing is adding 4 stops of dynamic range to your 14 stop file, which gives us an end result once we merge these to HDR and Lightroom of an 18 stop dynamic range DNG. If you do 5 frames with 2 stops in between, you're now expanding it to 22 stops. So it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the drive menu. Let me just set it back to single. And Josh, you want to talk about stealth timer briefly since you already mentioned it?
Yeah, I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory. Self timer is going to be a delay in between pressing the shutter and the camera actually firing the shutter. I use this all the time when I'm doing lens testing on a tripod or shooting landscapes. You have 2 options, 2 seconds or 12 seconds. I find 12 seconds to be excruciatingly long, but
Yes.
I guess it depends on what you're doing. I mostly use either 2 seconds or I use my custom self-timer hack with the interval shooting. So easy.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about focusing? Or you want
Yeah,
me to-
that's going to be the
I
big
know-
one. That's
I'm
gonna be
going
the
to have some stuff to say, but I want you to,
Okay.
to kick it off. So
Cool.
over to you.
Over to me. All right. So what we got going here.
This is probly the most
yeah.
important menu. So I think we need to.
Yeah,
I don't want to rush it for sure.
Well, let's come back to us, Jose,
Yeah.
real quick. We're just going to pre-game this one because this is one of the most significant upgrades. When people ask, oh, well, I should get the Q3 over the Q2 because it's 60 megapixels instead of 47. We're like,
Right.
nah, that's
Right.
really incremental upgrade. It's like, oh, well, it has a better viewfinder. It's like, well, it kind of has the same viewfinder. So
No, it's nicer, but
It is nicer.
There is, in our opinion, there's one key reason to do the upgrade.
focusing.
Yeah.
Focusing is number 1 upgrade from the Q2 to the Q3. Like, if you want to just distill everything down, yes, there is a ton of really nice upgrades from the Q2 to the Q3. And the sum total does make it worth upgrading. But the standout feature for both of us has been the improved autofocus. Because what has happened is on all previous generation Leica live view cameras, that includes all the SL range, all the Qs, CLs, TLs, everything, have all had contrast detect autofocus, which means that it reads off the sensor and does some magic algorithm to basically focus to optimize live view contrast. That's limited in speed by the refresh rate of the sensor and how fast the processor can crunch those numbers. But mainly, the number one limiting factor is the readout of the sensor. The Q3 is the first Leica live view camera to have a hybrid phase detect and contrast detect autofocus system. And phase detection actually works on a different premise, not based on the live view. It's based on an optical characteristic. This is not new tech. That's the irony, right?
Yeah, it's old tech.
It's old tech.
Yeah.
Phase detect is what SLRs used and DSLRs used with a split mirror where it would direct it to the autofocus sensor, and this was a phase detect system. So now, I guess everything old is new again. So
It works for me.
yeah, but the phase detection is much faster than contrast detect autofocus. Historically, contrast detect is much more accurate than phase detection. So the Q3 now has the best of both worlds. You have the speed of the phase detect autofocus system with the precision and accuracy and repeatability of the contrast detect autofocus system, which is like awesome.
Yeah.
And in real life practice of using this, and I think now, I've used this kind of at length. Josh has used it. Our colleagues, Kirsten, Peter, Jose, they've all used the camera now, and I think the universal feedback was, wow, the autofocus system's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about our recommended settings to get the most out of that.
Yes.
So
Yeah, if we run out of time and can't get through all the little stuff in the menu,
This is it.
I could live with that because this focusing setup is, in my opinion and David's opinion, very important. So without further ado, David, take us through the focusing menu, and I'll throw some stuff in there while you're doing it.
For sure. Okay, so we're going into focusing.
So we're on page 1 of the
Still.
main menu.
Yep.
Just so you guys know. So page 1, third item down, focusing. Go.
Focusing.
Go.
All right, focusing mode. And here we have either intelligent autofocus, autofocus S, which means autofocus single, autofocus C, which is autofocus continuous. And I think there's some confusion about how this works as well, unless you've done a deep dive into the manual. But basically, autofocus single is you half press the shutter, you get a green box, it's locked on, and you can take a picture. It actually doesn't historically let you take a picture if you're not locked on. So if you are in autofocus single and you push really fast and the camera doesn't acquire focus, it won't shoot. Camera's not broken. It just is waiting to acquire focus. Autofocus continuous, camera's constantly searching for focus all the time.
Well, halfway pressed.
Halfway pressed.
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
not right. It would kill your battery if
Yeah,
it's focusing.
yeah, sorry,
all the time.
yes,
Sorry.
yes.
When you're halfway pressed, it is continuously trying to acquire focus. Even after it acquires focus, it will continue to track. That can be good for moving subjects. It will let you take a picture if it's not perfectly in focus. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Intelligent autofocus, I find to be the best compromise of the
Well,
two.
it's not even a compromise. It's actually
It's a combination.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a combination. So what intelligent autofocus does, essentially, is it's autofocus single, where you acquire focus, the box turns green. If your subject moves between the time that you acquired focus and when you shoot a picture, it adjusts as if it was continuous, which I think is fantastic, and it's what I use pretty much all the time. So intelligent autofocus is the way to get sharper pictures with subjects that don't want to stand still.
Yeah, the only time I've found this to be not as useful is if I'm on a tripod shooting something super static.
sure,
It's like
sure.
like car stuff or landscape stuff, because you don't want the camera to be fooled by like a cloud or something moving in the wind. So David and I would say we use this 90% of the time, but there may be that 10% use case where AF single
Absolutely.
is useful.
I could see that.
Just to throw that in there.
Yeah, or manual focus.
Worldwide, that's another, yeah.
You'll notice manual focus is not in this menu. I wonder why.
Broken.
It's broken. Switch to the overhead view here. Okay. The reason is because the camera has a manual control for switching into autofocus and manual focus. There's a little catch release here, a little button.
Can you get that in the light better so we
don't
can
know,
see
I'm
it?
gonna try.
There you go.
There.
Right there.
Kind of. Okay, there.
Yeah.
So this is a little
okay.
button. And if you push that button in, while you turn the ring, now I'm in manual focus.
I'm going to say,
And you will notice
oh,
you can,
he
yes?
went back.
No,
Well,
no, go
no,
ahead.
go to my close-up, Jose, if you can, the overhead. Because this is one of the most common, I I hate to use the word mistake, but the most common user error that I see across all Q cameras is the camera's manual focus ring has a locked position for autofocus. So if you simply turn it all the way to AF like this and try to shoot with autofocus, it's not going to work. It may seem like it's supposed to work because you've turned it all the way over. You need to actually hold down the locking button and fully lock the focus ring so that AF is lined up with this line right here, right in the middle. That's the only way autofocus will work. I just had a phone call last week, somebody who called me and said, the autofocus isn't working. And I say, all right, turn the focus ring all the way to where it stops, press the button, turn it the rest of the way and lock it so that it can't move. And that is how you make sure that autofocus is engaged. If it's in any other position, even if it's resting against it, it's not going to autofocus.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
That is a good
Carry
tip
on.
for sure.
Carry on.
Okay, here we go. So now we've covered focus mode. Now we have, which is very confusing, focus mode and then AF mode.
No, that's not confusing. Focus mode is how it's going to focus.
Yeah.
AF mode is how it's going to autofocus.
Sure.
Well, I guess focus mode is also how it's going to autofocus.
I know, exactly.
All right,
Right.
I retract my statement. It doesn't make any sense.
It's a little confusing, but these aren't the droids you're looking for. Okay, so autofocus mode, this gives you your, I guess, options on beyond the focus. I would say the other one is focus methodology in terms of continuous, single, or intelligent. Now we're talking about the
location.
And the subject size or the subject type. So multi-field autofocus, not my favorite. If you're shooting very unpredictable things, maybe. What multi-field autofocus is going to do is use the whole sensor and find what's closest to the camera and guess that that's what you're trying to photograph. I kind of call this a point and shoot mode, and not in a nice way. Not my favorite. Spot autofocus is going to be extremely small. You get a nice...
Well, select it and show them on the screen so you can see.
They may not be able to see it.
Well, multi-field they're not going to see.
Yeah, multi-field you can't see.
No, well, your weight. No, I'm just saying so they can see what the spot looks like.
For sure. Yeah. So
So go to spot. There we
So
go.
if we go to spot, you'll see that there's just a little...
Put the lens cap on. We got this.
We got this. There you go.
That's what I want to show.
Okay, so it's a little tiny itty bitty crosshair that we can move around. I'm moving it around by the direction pad, and it's an extremely small focus area. Not my personal favorite. I do know that Josh has some use cases for this.
Yeah, I use this when I'm doing car photography because I'll put it right over the hood emblem or on the side of the wheel, wherever I want it to be the perfect point of focus, and it usually is a relatively small area. So the spot AF mode ensures that the camera is looking at the smallest possible subject size so I can get very precise focus. But the downside is, number one, it takes a long time to move it around with the arrow keys. And number two, if there's even a slight area of solid tone or color, it may get confused by that.
Right. Not my favorite.
Yeah.
Not for general purpose.
Correct.
Okay, so what I do recommend is the next one down, which, there we go, which is field. I happen to really like field. I find it to be the most useful, and I'm going to demonstrate that. What field is it gives you a little bounding box here, and you have press. It will turn green when it's in focus. You can change the size of this. There's 3 different sizes. If you push and hold until it gives you the little red corners, you can now use the thumb wheel to make it smaller, which is going to be closer to spot, but still a little bit more forgiving than spot. This is what I would use for really precise, small subject matter rather than spot. You go to the middle size, which I find to be the most practical for most shooting, or the large size if you have large areas of solid color, for instance, where it's having problems picking up on contrast or an edge. So I would use that. But the only way to adjust this, and then you have press the shutter to set it up. Again, to do that, you just push and hold on the field itself until you get those 2 little red corners, and then you can use the thumb wheel to adjust those. The next one, we're going to go back into focusing here. Okay, so I do prefer field, but there is other ones. Zone, primarily useful for fast-moving subjects. because this is basically going to.
It's like a massive field.
It's like a massive
Basically.
field of spots, and you can move it around a little bit, up and down, left and right. So let's say you're expecting to shoot, I don't know, a moving car that's going past you, and you're waiting at the turn at a racetrack. Okay, you know that you want to line the car up on the left side of the frame. You don't want to put the box over there because you're not sure the field will hit it.
A reflection there.
Sorry,
There you
you're
go.
not sure the field's going to hit that. So you put the zone on and say, okay, I'm going to wait for this car. And as it's coming around the corner, you half press. As the car comes in the frame, you're tracking with it. This is probably going to be your best chance of getting that car in focus. It's, again, a much more specific use case for you're predicting a subject to be in that.
I've never used it, so
No.
I think you should go on to the next one.
But it's there. It's there. And that's kind of a use case.
Watch your reflections, dude.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next one is tracking. And this one is difficult to demonstrate without actually demonstrating it. But you'll notice it's like a field, and also like the field. Can we resize it?
No.
No. So this one cannot be resized. You can move it by touching it
Oh, see?
and putting it into video mode.
See, David and I, we do it too. We're
We do
only
it too.
human.
Okay. But what this is,
Want me to explain it? Because I
Okay.
use it, so I can explain it if you like.
well, you lock on first, and once you've locked on, it identifies the subject that you're looking at, and it follows it around, and then
Yeah.
the focus point moves.
It does a decent
You wanna-
job.
Talk about it.
There you go. It does a decent job. It's not foolproof, but essentially, once you put it over what you are expecting to be in focus and half press the shutter, it will do its best to track whatever that is. There's no way we can show this to you. We need to get like a HDMI into an actual EQ and show it. We'll do that next time. Anyway, but it works decently well. I don't use it that much, but it is fun if you're doing like sports or action and you put it on the person you're trying to track and just half press, and it will just do its best to follow them all over.
But I think there's a better way,
And he's going to show you.
and I'm going to show you. To me. Hey, that's me. Okay. What I like is eye face body detection, because combined with the new Phase Detect hybrid system, this is absolute magic. There's a second option as well, just below it, called eye face body plus animal detection, because who doesn't love pictures of cute little animals? The difference between these is essentially that this one will include animal bodies and cats and dogs and things like that have different shaped faces. But it works remarkably well. I have used this for just quick pictures of cute dogs in the street and whatnot, and every single time it locks on. It is like magic.
You have to put a disproportionate amount of faith into it than what you're used to, because you don't think you're going to come to me, Jose? There you go.
To both of us.
Yeah, there you kind of both of us. That's
There
fine.
we go.
You don't think that it's going to work. You think, how could it possibly be that quick? Because you're literally just.
It works.
I
works.
I was photographing the dog in the mountains last month, and he's running around, and I'm just like grabbing every single one. Perfect. I don't know. It's magic. I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, it's just that good.
And if we could actually show it to you,
We would.
we would.
We will figure it out.
We'll figure it
eventually,
out. But I'm going to demonstrate with Josh.
Okay.
What you will see first, if he turned around, you don't have to turn around, and there's no face for the camera to see, there will be a large box around his whole body. So it would identify that the blob that is the back of Josh,
I am often called a blob-like person.
or a blob like
Yeah, there you go.
It would identify that as a body and be like, I think this is a body.
Yeah.
He turns around, now it's going to draw a box around his face, and then it's going to put two little boxes around the eyes, which is a little bit creepy, but it works. And there's arrows. Let's say that it's just Josh. He's the only one in the frame. This is going to behave a little differently. So with one subject, you're going to see a box like this with little eyeball boxes with an arrow between the eyeballs. So if you're taking a portrait and someone is turned like this, or someone is turned like that, you want to get the front eye. So you can actually use the back direction pad to toggle which eye you want it to focus on, which is really cool.
Pretty remarkable.
It's really cool. Now, if there was two of us in the frame like this, and you were pointing the camera at both of us, it's going to draw boxes around both of our heads, with eyes for both of us, with a little arrow on the side, let's say, of my face, and you can jump between me and Josh. That
That should always be in focus.
You know that I
This
can
is
see you, right?
This is just no.
So what you're going to see is the ability to choose your subject. It will, by default, choose the closest one to you. But if you don't want that, and you have a whole group of people, it's going to track all of the people in the shot, which is also looks like magic.
Yeah.
Of course, if Enzo was in the frame, it would just prioritize Enzo
Of course.
over all the humans.
As it should.
As it should.
As it should.
But it's an amazingly useful feature. It can look a little overwhelming if you pointed at a group of 4 people because there's just boxes.
Get used to it.
And they're constantly moving and resizing as the people move around. So as you're aiming this at human subjects or pet subjects, those boxes are just constantly moving around. And when you have press a shutter, it'll lock on, turn green, and take the picture. And it is so incredibly fast because it is pre-acquiring those subjects.
Yeah.
IAF with eye face body, I mean,
It's a game changer.
It's everything.
It's a game changer.
It's everything.
Yeah. You're in video mode.
I am also in video mode.
All right.
All right.
Next.
So
Next.
that is it for.
Go back to the overhead.
Yep, that is it for focusing. Okay, we're still in. Actually, no, we're
not even halfway.
But wait,
down.
there's more. These ones are easy. Okay, autofocus assist lamp. You can see it here. There it is. You see the autofocus assist lamp? It's that really bright red light that blinds people. Right there. There it is. If you want to focus faster and you don't care about annoying people, you can leave it on.
It's for low light situations.
It's for low
It's just basically creating additional illumination
For more contrast.
for the camera's autofocus to lock onto.
Yeah. But if you were trying to be discreet and not look like you're taking pictures of people, you probably want to turn that off. Focus assist, auto magnification, focus peaking sensitivity. These are for manual focus. So when you are in manual focus, in other words, switching it from the AF position to anywhere else on this ring, the auto magnification on means that it will magnify wherever that focus point is, just like if you had focus magnification on an M camera, for instance. Mm-hmm. So you can change where that point is of where it will magnify. If you don't want it to magnify and you find it annoying, this is where you can turn it off. You can also change your focus peaking various colors, or you can turn it off. I personally am not a huge fan of focus peaking, but I know a lot of people are. And you can change the color based on your subject. So if you're shooting a lot of people, green works great. If you're shooting a lot of trees and other things that are green, I find red to be the best. And peaking sensitivity, medium tends to work the best for most subjects. Touch AF is basically if you just tap on the screen in any of those except eye face body focus modes, it will follow your finger.
It's like an iPhone.
Like an iPhone, yeah. Wherever you tap, it'll focus. And then
we'll go
and I'll show you the other one. Yeah.
There's a few settings in here.
There are.
So if you don't like doing that because you feel like you're touching the screen by mistake and moving the point around.
Well, this is also yeah. So let's do this, and then I want to come to both of us because this is another really important safety tip. Okay. So Jose, come to both of us here. Okay. A lot of people ask us, okay, my focus point keeps moving every time I put the camera to my face. Yes, it does. That is a super common issue.
Yeah.
If you do not want that, just turn Touch AF off.
Well, there's two things you have to turn off, but
Touch AF, EV.
The next thing. Yeah.
The next thing, EVF off. If you turn those two things off, the focus point will just remain where it is, and you will only be able to use it with the rear direction pad.
Yeah. So go back to David's, Jose. So off means you cannot use your finger on the screen to move the focus point around. Touch AF means you can. Touch AF and release means when you tap the screen,
it'll take a picture.
It both focuses and fires a shutter at the same time. I have not figured out a use for this. I'm sure somebody has, but
I haven't.
I have not.
No. So
okay.
Touch AF. If you want to disable that and you say Touch AF off, and then the next option, Touch AF in EVF, that means when your eye is up to the electronic viewfinder and the screen goes blank, if you have Touch AF in EVF on, that means, and I'll show you the options, if you have it set to on, that means that you can still use the touch screen even though it's not active while you're looking through the viewfinder. This is something that some people like because they can have the camera to their eye and still use that to move the focus point around. I tend to prefer this off.
The AF quick setting only.
Yeah.
What that allows you to do is, remember when David showed how you can press and hold the screen to change the size of the focus point, the field? You can still do that with the using the EVF. So if you don't want to be able to move the focus point around, but you do want to be able to change the size by tapping and or pressing and holding the screen, that's what that middle setting, AF quick, AF quick setting only is for. It's a pretty specific use case. I'm surprised they gave it to you, but for me, off. I just turned it off.
Yeah, off. So our recommendation is to take Touch AF off and Touch AF and EVF off. That means the focus point stays where you put it.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep.
And if you want to move it, use the direction pad. It's really.
We should also mention the quick way to reset the field to the center.
For sure.
You can show that on your.
So let's say I've got the focus point over here, and I'm like, what is it doing all the way over here, focusing on my battery life? If you double tap anywhere on the screen, it will bring it back to center.
And this is true even if you have Touch AF turned off. This is always a way to get.
And it doesn't matter. You don't have to touch it in the middle. If I touch it anywhere on the screen, double tap, it goes back to the middle.
Yeah.
So that is the quick way to reset it. But you'll notice now it's not responding to my touch, which also means it won't respond to my nose.
There you go.
Okay, that is our recommended setting there. And then just...
Well, did we cover everything in focusing?
We did.
Okay.
Okay, then let me just cover exposure metering, and then I'll hand it back to you.
All right, that sounds good.
Okay, so exposure metering, we've got 4 options here.
Well, you missed one thing in focusing, dude.
What did I miss?
That one.
Oh. Blah, blah, blah,
You're supposed to be going through the whole camera. Give the people what they're not paying for.
Okay, here we go. So the last thing in focusing is autofocus tracking start position. And this is if let's say we're using that tracking focusing field where we're doing that continuous autofocus and using the focus tracking thing that looks like a field, but it's not a field. Last position is going to just basically try to reacquire where it left off. Center will just default back to the center position, and then you'll have to focus on that object and then offset your framing to accommodate, and it'll follow the subject again. And then recall will...
Can you not recall?
I cannot recall. Which
recall
one does recall do?
Recall is wherever you started tracking the subject.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's you could either let's say you're photographing a basketball game, you could have recall take it back to the rim if that's where you left it, where you started, or if the athlete is out of the frame and the focus point ended in the bottom left corner, if you have it on last position, it'll go back to the bottom left corner. So it's really just describing the behavior of using tracking. Where does that point go after your initial tracking is completed and you're ready to track another subject?
Right. For most people, most of the time,
yes,
center.
You can go to metering now. Well, it's like 9 o'clock. Well, do the metering and then we'll talk about.
We've got some announcements.
We'll talk about the announcement.
Okay.
You talk about metering first.
Yeah.
So that'll take you 53 minutes probably.
Nah, this is quick. Okay, metering.
Okay.
Metering. Oh, we have very specific recommendations. Okay. Spot metering. I see a lot of people using spot metering.
Don't use spot metering.
Don't use spot metering. It's way too spot specific.
It's too spotty.
It's too spotty. It's not good. If you love spot metering, great. Keep doing it. But I find that either, or let's say any of the last 3 options are going to be better than spot metering. Center weighted is the old school way. It works pretty well. I still use center weighted when I'm shooting on an M. It's great. My favorite is highlight weighted metering. I use this on every camera that has it. What that means is instead of averaging the subject, and if you, let's say, reframe where a really bright part of the image is no longer in the center. Let's say it's on the left side of your frame. It will now blow out that area because it's exposing for the shadow dead center in the middle if you were on center weighted. Even multi-field is still biasing the center, even though it's looking at the whole image. What highlight weighted metering does, because we're in a live view camera, is looking at the whole scene, finding the brightest part of the image, and biasing. That's a very important word. It is biasing the exposure towards the highlight. Highlight weighted metering. It is not 100% always definitely going to retain all the highlights. You still need to keep an eye on your highlight clipping and adjust exposure compensation accordingly. One of my suggestions feedback to Leica has been on highlight weighted metering to have a setting to have more discrete settings, meaning, okay, just an average, middle of the road, highlight weighted metering like we have now, or let's say more aggressive or absolute. More aggressive meaning it's going to weight highlights more, and an absolute setting where it will not let you clip a highlight ever. It'll always keep it at, say, 254 instead of 255 for the very, very brightest pixel in the image. I'm saying that's my suggestion. That's not what's in the camera currently. I would love to see that. If Leica's listening to this,
they're not.
To this, they're not. Or
To us right now, no.
Or the other times I've given them direct feedback to this effect.
I'm there in October. I'll yell at them.
Yeah, we're going to yell at them. Okay.
Now,
and then multi-field
Yeah.
is more like center weighted metering. It's just evaluative metering. It's, what a lot of people use. I really, really recommend highlight weighted metering for almost all cases because you have so much latitude in the shadows and you have very little in the highlights. So always bias towards the highlights and you will be much happier and you'll make me much happier. And that's really all that matters, right?
That's right. Making David happy is all
Making
that matters.
David happy. All right. So that
Come back to us. So now we got to do a little bit of housekeeping. We have some announcements.
Let me get my broom.
Some other stuff, okay? First thing I want to mention is in an upcoming show, I think it's going to be October or November. I don't know yet. I will be doing we'll be, mostly me, we'll be doing a 50 Sumalux M episode. Everybody loved our 35 Sumalux M episode at the end of last year. So we're following it up with an anthology about every single 50 Sumalux M lens ever made. And part of that involves gathering up said lenses.
Yes.
So this is a call for help. If you own any particularly interesting special edition, vintage, rare iteration of a 50 Sumalux M lens and are willing to loan it to us for a few days for the show, we would be super grateful. We'll give you a shout out. We'll give you some Leica swag, whatever. Especially looking for version 1 black paint, version 2 black paints, stainless steel, titanium, platinum, whatever you got. If you have one you're willing to loan us.
Just send all the 50 Luxes, care of Josh.
That's right.
And
that's the first thing.
Yeah.
So that'll be coming up. It's going to be a sweet episode. I've already started working on it. I cannot wait. Next thing is, if you have a keen eye, you notice something different on my wrist than usual.
Ooh. Wait, you could use the close-up camera.
That's true. We'll get there. So David and I, as you may or may not know, are very much into the world of watches, and we find there's a lot of crossover.
Horology.
Right. I don't want to have snobby. There's a lot of crossover in the world of Leica and the world of fine horology. And if you're into that field as well, you probably know that Leica has been making their own watches for the last couple of years. Production has been quite limited, and where you could get them has been quite limited. But finally, at long last, you are able to get your Leica watch at Leica Store Miami. So we're going to do, probably in December, an entire episode about the Leica watches. It's going to be covering all the ranges, everything. In the interim, I'm just getting to know the watches now by wearing this Julie's or yours? Whose watch is this?
Yes.
I think this is probably Julie's watch. This is the ZM2, which is the one that has the...
A little glare there.
It's hard to get the glare out of there. There we go. One that has the GMT function. And, I can't possibly be more excited that two of my favorite passions have kind of come together in one. And the fact that I get to sell it is basically the coolest thing ever. So we now have a section on the Leica Store Miami website of all the Leica watches. Maybe Jose or Lorena can throw a link to that collection in the chat. And I've got the ZM1 and ZM2, both regular and monochrome versions listed. There's tons of photos. There's the story about the watches, tech specs, what's in the box, all that stuff. So certainly stay tuned for more news and information about the Leica watches. But if you're interested in one, you want to learn more about it. Oh yeah, the back is the best part.
The back, the movement is really cool.
The movement is amazing. It's made by Lehman. It's a German-made movement. Here we go. See if I can get it.
You gotta go a
Focus.
little higher. I think that looks
Look
pretty
at
good.
that. So it's a manual wind watch, which means there's no rotor interfering you looking at this absolute little work of art, 26 jewels. It's a unique movement for the Leica watches. So if you know anything about watches, you know that as opposed to just grabbing an off-the-shelf movement or using something that they could just get anywhere, Leica worked with Lehman in Germany to make a unique movement for their watches. So
And it was important for Leica to do a fully made in Germany watch.
yes, these watches are made at the factory. I've seen them. We were there together. We've seen them doing it. So
we actually met the watchmaker who's behind the design and manufacture of these watches. So,
Yeah, so-
like the actual person.
more on this to come for sure. But if you are interested in the Leica watches, you want to learn more about them, come to us, come talk to us, come to the store, go on our website, let us know. So that's
it's cool.
other exciting news. Now, we have a really cool event coming up, as well as some other interesting things going on. If you're familiar at all with LSI, the Leica Society International, it's an incredible organization that David and I and all of us really have been to their events all over the world. And there's two interesting LSI-related things going on. I think we have slides. Yes.
Yes.
So the first is the fall sweepstakes.
Wait, you can win a Leica Q3.
This is probably easier to get a Q3 this way than it is to get one by buying it.
Yes.
So starting on September 1st, you can enter. I think tickets are, I forget how much tickets cost. I will tell you in a second. So it's a great way to support the LSI and also give yourself a chance to win a Q3. 10 entries are 25, 50 entries are 100, 300 entries for 500. So if you want a chance to win a Q3 plus support an incredible organization, you can do so by entering the LSI sweepstakes starting on the 1st of September. The next LSI-related news is the LSI grant, which is an incredible opportunity for photographers who have either completed projects or who are working on a project to get support and recognition. The grant is running the applications run until September 7th. You can win $7,500, a Q3, and you get an exhibition at the Leica Store Gallery in Porto, Portugal, as well as opportunities to exhibit at other Leica stores around the world, and featured in the Viewfinder magazine, which is the LSI's publication. So
It's pretty cool.
if you have a body of work or are working on a body of work that goes with the theme, which is our fragile planet is the theme. There's a lot more information about it on the LSI website.
Yeah, I got the website up here.
Perfect. David can show us on the old screen.
Here you go. So if you take a look over here, let me make that a little bigger. Okay, so you can see here, it's just leicasociety.org to take you here, and you can see the LSI annual photo grant where you can learn more about that, as well as the Q3 sweepstakes, and you can purchase your tickets there.
Starting on September 1st.
Yes.
So the grant applications end on September 7th. The sweepstakes begins on September 1st. So that's that. So I want to thank the LSI. They've supported us for years. They've been an incredible organization. David and I have been to a lot of their events, and
I've been a member since 2006.
There you go. And we'll continue to do so.
It's the Leica Society, formerly known as LHSA, just in case there's some confusion.
Correct. Yes. Formerly LHSA, now LSI. And the last, two more exciting things.
Two more exciting things.
One is
We have.
I'm gonna make sure I get. Okay, so September. I want to get the dates.
Let's get this slide up.
September 22nd to the 24th is the Women Photo Project Summit in collaboration with the Leica Women Photo Project and Leica Camera USA and Leica Store Miami and some other organizations that are too small for me to read. This is truly something special and something that's going to be a comprehensive experience about women in Leica and women in photography and just photography in general. So the event is over 3 days. It consists of a gallery opening, cocktail party on Friday night. Saturday, we've got a Leica lounge. We've got a roundtable discussion and a workshop as well. And
actually, the workshop is free, but limited, I think, to 30 people. It's an off-site portrait workshop.
Okay.
Yep. So that's going to be really interesting. And then there's also going to be a photo slam.
Well, right. Sunday is another Leica lounge, another roundtable discussion, and a photo slam, which is like a live critique. So we have some incredible photographers who are joining us. Maria Martinez-Cañas, Maggie Stieber, Greta Rico, and there's more. Hold on. Ellie, where is she? Hold on. I'm going to get all the... I don't want to miss anyone. Ellie Farinago, sorry. I practice these names ahead of time, and I'm still butchering them, so Lorena can laugh at me later. And more. And Ashlyn McKibben. We can't forget about Ashlyn. So this is like full stop, 3 days of full immersion in photography. So if you are either in Miami or want to come join us, you can RSVP on our website. We also have things like hotel recommendations, flight recommendations, anything like that. Any questions about it, please reach out.
So Lorena if she hasn't already, because I got to go back into the chat. If she is, can drop.
Yeah, we sent the
there we
links
go.
already.
She is
Perfect.
on it.
All right, so there we go. She's dropped a link in the chat. And just to show you that, bring up the screen again. The link will take you here, which is the Leica Women Photo Project Summit. And you can see that we've got a day-by-day itinerary here and to RSVP for each of the different events. So if you can't make it for the whole thing, we would encourage you to come and at least join for some of it.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be great. And this is a, we did this previously. We did a similar program a few years back, and it was a huge success, really well attended, a lot of great photographers, and we highly encourage it.
The last thing we want to talk about is 2 workshops that have a couple of open spots left. David, can you pull up the workshop screen for me, please? We have the New Hampshire and Maine Coast Leica Photo Adventure in the fall, October 11th through the 18th. That's a workshop that David and I have done before. It is gorgeous. The nice thing about this workshop, from my experience, is it's not insanely hard to get there.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you do get there, it is extremely rewarding and very target rich.
Yes.
The next workshop we have is our workshop in Japan. We did this for the first time last year. The feedback I heard from everybody that went was overwhelmingly positive. The pictures were incredible. David was there last year. Are you going this year as well?
I am.
Yeah. That's November 7th to the 17th. And the Japan workshop is pretty cool because I think it's only limited to 8 participants, right?
That's correct.
So
actually, both of those trips are.
They're
8.
both. Okay, so the instructor to student ratio is really, really, really good.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah, you can come back to us. So I'll just give you a quick rundown.
Quick rundown. 'Cause we have
So the New England trip.
5 pages of Q3.
I know. In October is going to be my colleague Colin and I will be leading that. And as Josh said, we first did a trip up there in 2011. Can you believe that? Wow,
Time
that was a long
flies.
time ago.
Yeah, I wasn't even old enough to rent a car back then.
Let's not talk about that. I've led trips up to New England multiple times since then. We have all the locations really dialed in. We stay in nice hotels. It's not a huge amount of driving. Very, very target rich and great food. If you want to get your lobster on, you can. And that one should be also easy to get to and just a great
and the
fun
next
trip.
one?
Japan, not as easy to get to, but so worth it.
Yeah.
It's 8 people only, and we're going to be going to Tokyo, to Kyoto, to the Izu Peninsula, to a traditional ryokan. We have all sorts of private photo shoots, both with 2 Maikos, which are geisha in training, up in Kyoto. We go to an artisan workshop. We are going to actually an ink making factory, which is super cool, like the traditional calligraphy ink that they do by hand. So much to do, so much to see, and it is absolute cultural immersion. Once you get there, pretty much everything is included. We cover all these really amazing, meals at traditional places where you sit on the floor and there's rice paper screens and all that. So it's fantastic. My colleague Peter and I will be leading that trip in November, and that is their fall. So we also have a 2-day trip out to Mount Fuji to photograph the beautiful landscape there with the fall colors as well. So a little bit of city, a little bit of culture, artisans, craftsmen, and landscape. So it's pretty much a whirlwind. We will show you most everything in Japan that is worth seeing.
Cool.
And
now we have to talk about a Q3 menu again.
We do. We just listed the Japan trip this afternoon.
Yeah.
And already we have 5 spots remaining as of right now. So act now.
Act now. Okay. Back to the menu, please. That's the reason they're here.
Back to the menu.
All right. I'll carry on here. So
Carry on.
We haven't made a lot of progress in our hour and 23 minutes. Well, I guess it's only been an hour and 15, so fine. David finished off at exposure meeting, so I will cover the next couple of things. The second to last item on page 1 is exposure compensation. This is something you can access through the quick menu or a few other ways. And simply put, this is when you're shooting in one of the either fully automatic or semi-automatic modes, it will bias the camera's exposure to be either dark or bright. The most important thing to understand about exposure compensation is that it is sticky, meaning once you set it, it will not change unless you set it again. So if you want to do a shot that's 2 stops over because it's whatever, it will stay that way unless you go back and change it. So that is exposure compensation. You can use your finger on the scale as well. Now,
Finger on the scale.
Finger on the scale.
That's like
now we are going to go
that.
to ISO. David covered this a little bit in the quick menu. This is the camera's ISO setting, which you can go from auto all the way up to 100,000. Personally, I would just leave it at 100,000 and never jump. Kidding. David and I both use auto quite a lot. So that is your ISO. Just to kind of quickly just clean this up here, get through that first page. We've done it. One page. The next page, page 2.
Whoa.
Now we have some more fun stuff. So next we have auto ISO settings. This is where you're going to control the camera's behavior for when you're in auto ISO. So first you have the maximum ISO. So if I hit the center button, I can choose the highest ISO that the camera will be allowed to go to in auto ISO. I like 12.5. What do you like, David?
6400 if you can keep it under, or 12.5 if you really need a little light.
Okay. Shutter speed limit is going to depend on your subject matter. Auto is fine unless you're shooting things that are moving a lot. Even you may need a 250th or a 500th. This is basically the slowest shutter speed the camera is going to use before it kicks up the ISO to the next increment. The next two settings are for flash, same idea. Since neither of us really use flash, I can't say we dive into these settings very much. But these are important because the first two, they are going to describe how high the camera will go on ISO and how slow the shutter speed will be in auto ISO.
But I do wonder on the Q3 how useful this would be as a second camera body to, say, like a wedding photographer who's using an SL2 or SL2S, and they have some room strobe set up, and they put, because let's say they have a remote trigger on here,
Right.
it might actually be useful, but not necessarily for most applications.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Carrying on, because we have lots to cover.
We do,
So
indeed.
I'm going to try to be efficient here.
Let's do it.
Next, we have white balance. This is, how do I put this plainly? This is how the camera responds to the color temperature of whatever light you're photographing in. I know David likes to use daylight.
I do.
I generally prefer auto. It does tend to depend on the scene that I'm in. And of course, if you're photographing a DNG file, you can change the white balance to anything you like without consequence later. So relatively low risk if you screw this up. Now, of course, with JPEG, that's another story, but hopefully if you're watching this video, you're shooting at least DNG plus JPEG.
Yeah.
So there is a gray card functionality here at the bottom. So I can either get there by going all the way down, or I can simply, if I'm at the top, I can hit up. And I can actually, if I'm doing a studio shoot, I can use this function to get a custom white balance for the exact lighting situation that I'm in and have it set in the camera. So that is what the gray card. Press the center button too. I love how it calls it abort. Not cancel, to abort.
Oh, gosh.
Abort. Okay. Anyway, photo file format, pretty straightforward. This is where you would shoot either a DNG file, which is a RAW file, a DNG plus JPEG, or a JPEG only. 99.99% of the time, I am shooting a DNG only. I never shoot JPEG only, and I would probably only do this if I wanted to get images off the camera as quickly as possible via Wi-Fi using the Photos app and share them without having to wait for a DNG file to download.
Which I will, let me talk about DNG Resolution and JPEG settings because it's a good segue.
Of course, yeah. We're going to kick it over to David. Here we go.
Okay, so now, similar to what was introduced on the M11 and the M11 monochrome, the Q3 does feature variable resolution RAW files. You can either shoot an L, M, or S DNG, same as on the M11. So if you're used to that, this should look very, very similar. We've got 60, 36, and 18 megapixel. This is for the DNG. Based on testing that we did with the M11, with this, you're best off shooting at 60 megapixels pretty much all the time.
I think we have a pinned comment, right, on our Q3
think
episode?
we do. I
Because there was
think
some
we do.
controversy about
There
this,
was, yeah.
apparently. I don't remember exactly what it was now, but
It was a while ago.
yeah. It was
But basically, what would you say, Josh? If you're paying for the pixels, you may as well use them.
that's fair. I mean,
You know?
there are definitely use cases for the lower resolution DNGs, and to have the ability to shoot a RAW file that's smaller can
Sure.
be extremely useful for some people in some cases, or we're certainly appreciative of it. But in our experience, the performance gain is negligible, if any.
Correct.
I tested by basically downsampling a 60 megapixel file to the, 36
Yep.
megapixel to see how the ISO performance was. And
Pretty much the same.
it was, yeah. So don't use the variable DNG files to get better performance. Use it because you want a smaller file for more storage on the camera, slower computer, client delivery, whatever.
Faster burst or deeper burst or whatever.
Correct.
But for instance, let's say you are shooting let's say you are a wedding photographer and you're shooting, reception pictures. You probably don't need.
Oh wait, Gaston just signed up for Japan. Sweet, thank you.
Nice,
That's gonna be
nice.
fun.
Awesome.
Give him a hard time while you're over there, please. Okay.
Please don't give me a hard time.
Give it a hard time. Really, really hard time.
Okay, so let's say you are a wedding photographer, right? You don't need to deliver 2,000 60 megapixel images of, your friends and family dancing the night away to celebrate good times, right? You just don't. So that would be a perfect use case for a lower resolution to take up less space on your computer, on the client's computer, to make transferring files easier, processing files faster. If you're doing street photography and it's not going to be for print or something like that, sure, use lower resolution. There's absolutely nothing wrong with 36 megapixel. Do bear in mind, though, that you will not be able to post-crop those as much. One of the reasons to shoot higher resolution on the Q3 is because you do have a fixed 28 millimeter lens. So if you want to crop in tighter later, that extra resolution is really nice to get you there with still giving a printable image. If you limit yourself from the beginning with 36 or 18 megapixels, you're not going to be able to crop in very much, if at all. So keep that in mind.
All right.
And to that end,
Gotta keep going here.
there is a little hybrid approach, right?
Okay.
So let's come back here. So let's say you do LDNG at 60 megapixel. You can go into the JPEG settings, and where you see max JPEG resolution, you can set this to MJPEG, right? That will give you a 60 megapixel raw image plus a 36 megapixel JPEG image that you can then transfer right off the camera using the Leica FOTOS app and send it on, or even SJPEG, which is going to give you 18 megapixel. If you want to know why it says, let's say, 60, 39, 19, 8, 6, that's a little confusing. These are not lottery numbers or bingo numbers. These are, in fact, the resolutions that you get with the variable digital crop modes on the Q3. So you're getting 60 at full, 28, 39 if you crop into a 35 equivalent, 19 for the 50 equivalent, 8 for the 75 equivalent, and 6 for the 90 equivalent. So those are what those actually mean for the various resolutions. So you'll notice if we go to SJPEG and we went to our 50 megapixel or 50 millimeter equivalent setting, you're only getting 6 megapixels versus 19. So that's a pretty big difference. But if you know you're not going to be cropping the JPEGs and you're not going to be using digital crop modes and you want to offload those files and send them on without having to resize them in post-processing, this is a great workaround that you can add these on to your full-size DNG files. As far as the rest of the JPEG settings, again, these only impact the JPEGs that are being generated at a camera. If you're shooting DNG only, you could just ignore this whole menu.
Well, it does also impact.
Kind of.
It does
Well,
also
yeah.
impact live view.
Okay, well, that's true.
So if you want to change
Film
the way
stops.
that live view looks, you can do that. One of the features
That's
that
true. That's
is unique to the Q3 are these Leica looks, which are essentially JPEG presets that are not stored in the camera. They're actually stored in the Leica FOTOS app so that new ones can be added, different looks can be added. Since I don't shoot JPEG, I haven't tried the Leica looks yet. I think they are fun if you just want to import photos through the app and share them and whatever. But the Leica looks thing is a new feature that Leica is continually expanding. And you basically
Through
just
Photos,
you connect to the Leica FOTOS app and you download up to 6 at a time Leica looks, which you can store in the camera.
At which Leica provides.
Yes.
Like, we should be specific. These are not user-defined looks. These are Leica-defined looks that they provide to you.
But since we're not really shooting JPEG, I just, we
don't use
we're
it.
going to move on.
Right, but I will show you that menu option just real quick. So noise reduction, again, that's just for JPEGs. And then film style, this is actually where you can change. So for instance, if you go to monochrome, okay, wow, it looks great. You'll notice now the live view is in black and white, even though I'm shooting color DNGs. So it does affect the preview, and Josh definitely has a good point there. So these are ones that you can use there, or you can use the Leica looks.
Well, there's none on the camera right now.
But you'll notice it says download them using the Photos app, which we don't have. And then
we do have it. We're just not going to do it.
I mean, we don't. We're not. Okay,
we don't have iPhones, okay?
We're not doing
We
it
have
right now.
Motorola StarTacs. We're very sophisticated. Yeah, I'll hit you on,
I
I'll hit
have
you on,
that. I
I'll,
have
I'll hit you on T9 later. Don't worry.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're just really digging deep tonight.
know.
Okay. And then IDR is intelligent dynamic range. I actually do use this, and auto is useful for most everything, but I actually have used high IDR because it affects your live view experience. And if you are shooting one of those higher dynamic range scenes, it can be a little blown out, more blown out, let's say, in live view than if you're using the IDR, which is a better approximation of how you can correct the file to bring up the shadows and tone down the highlights in a raw image. So actually that is extremely useful, and I shouldn't be so quickly dismissive of JPEG settings. Josh, we already talked about scene modes.
Yeah, well, scene modes
You want to go into that?
Well, the basic is that the scene modes are going to give you more trouble than they're going to help you, because when you put the camera in any of the scene modes, you're locked out of a lot of settings. If you're buying a Q3, I don't have a problem with beginners buying anything they want, but don't be fooled thinking you're going to improve your photos by using the scene mode because you don't know all the settings yet. That's okay. You can learn the settings. There's tons of resources out there. I just think the scene modes do more harm than good, because I don't really see the need to have the camera making so many decisions for me about everything. I don't even know. Like, the only scene mode that could be useful is the auto mode, and that's because if we go to, here we go, auto mode is like, it locks out everything. So if you're giving the camera to someone else, to use it for some amount of time or just to take some basic photos, yeah, you could use auto mode to keep them from, screwing something up really badly. But the reality is, I don't think I've ever taken the Q3 out of the PASM scene mode. So
No, because it's a real camera.
So now we can officially say we're on page 3, and I can say we're probably going to have to do a part 2.
No, go. You
Yeah.
can get through this. You can get through
No,
this.
okay, optical image stabilization. The camera has 3 settings, on, off, or auto. If you want it on all the time, turn it on. It's pretty self-explanatory. Auto, I use auto most of the time. Off would be if I'm on a tripod. Easy. It is optical image stabilization. It's not sensor-based like on the SL2. Different technology, same sort of functionality. Next, photo aspect ratio. This is where you can change the aspect ratio of the image. This is only going to apply to JPEGs. It will crop the DNG, but it comes into Lightroom or Photoshop full size anyway. So this will really be more just like JPEG settings for affecting your live view. So for example, if I go to 1:1, now my live view is a square. So hooray. In the old Instagram days.
Oh gosh, yeah, I remember
Instagram
that.
was 1:1.
Only square, yes.
That's right. Perspective control is a feature that we saw added a couple of years ago in the M10P. And essentially, this is going to give you, I don't know if you're not going to be able to see it here, a box that will change as you tilt and move the camera. Oh, that sort of did something.
There you go.
You can see it. Anyway, this is going to essentially mirror what you can do in Lightroom, but it will apply that correction to the file in
pretty neat,
camera.
actually, yeah.
So it's for correcting perspectives if you're like photographing.
And more importantly,
Yes.
it also shows you what you're cropping out. Because often if you're shooting, let's say, up at a building and you're getting this keystoning, you can correct that in Lightroom, but you may be cutting out part of your frame that you don't want to, because it has to crop in a lot in order to resample that, to do geometric correction.
Yeah.
What the perspective control is showing you is a bounding box, so you can accurately frame within that box, and it will then correct it.
Beautiful.
It's really useful, actually.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next, we have shutter type. So inside of the Q3's lens and all of the Q camera's lens is a leaf shutter. It is a mechanical thing that opens and closes, and it makes a small, very quiet noise that you can hear. The Q3 also has an electronic shutter. This is a feature we first saw in the SL601 in a firmware update, and we've seen it now on all the new cameras, including the M11. Electronic shutter is basically powering the sensor on and off to make it temporarily light sensitive, which basically means you get an extremely, or you get a silent shutter. There's no noise whatsoever. You can also shoot at extremely high shutter speeds. The hybrid setting is generally most desirable. What that's going to do is use the mechanical shutter for everything except for when it cannot get a fast enough shutter speed with the mechanical shutter. It will automatically roll over to using the electronic shutter and use those faster speeds. And what will happen is, when this is doing it, you'll take a picture and you won't hear anything, and you'll wonder, wait, did the camera take a picture? And the answer is yes, it did. It just did it with the electronic shutter. The downside is you can't really use the electronic shutter to photograph something that's moving.
Quickly. Yeah.
You may get what's called a rolling shutter effect or a jello effect where it looks like distorted. We've explained it in more depth in other videos. I won't get into it here purely because we were trying to get through the whole camera.
Right. But we do recommend hybrid because if you want to shoot, let's say, and you want to get the beautiful bokeh at f1.7 wide open, and you're shooting in bright daylight, 2,000th of a second just isn't going to cut it.
Correct. All right, I've got to keep going though. Flash settings, we don't use flash, so I can't say I go into this menu very much. If you mount a flash on the camera and you want to make sure it goes off every time, you just want to turn this to on. That's the one advice that I will give you. I'm going to put that back on auto. Here we go. Exposure preview. This is really a very specific function. This is designed for when you don't want the camera to be giving you a real-time preview of what your exposure settings are in manual mode. If you're photographing in a studio with external strobes or flashes, what that means is the settings that you've dialed in for the flashes are going to be very different from the settings of the ambient light in the room. So if you were to take a picture without those flashes, that picture would be very dark. So if you have exposure preview set on PASM, your live view is going to be very dark because your live view is giving you a real-time preview of the exposure. So simply turning this to PAS will eliminate that problem if you're working in that particular environment. I like PASM most of the time because I can visually see the changes to my exposure happening as I change my exposure settings in manual mode. But that's what that does.
All right.
Page 4, huzzah, okay. Auto review. This controls what happens after you take a picture. From 1 second all the way down to the last option, shutter button press, something will happen, meaning the picture will pop up on the screen after you take it. I find that very annoying, so I turn auto review to off on all my cameras. I guess if like on a tripod maybe,
I like it,
but
though.
David likes it. I just find it slows things down, even if it doesn't really.
Because the thing is, if I use 1 second or 3 second, and it shows up on the screen, I see that I have an image, and as soon as you have press the shutter, it goes away.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
The permanent setting basically means that it stays on until you have pressed the shutter. Shutter button press means that you take a picture and leave the shutter button pressed, and as long as you're pressing down the button, the live view, or excuse me, the playback is showing the image you just took. I like off. That's just me.
All right. I'll talk about this because it's quick.
You got to be quick because we have.
I gotta be quick. I know.
Not a lot of time. Okay.
Okay. So long exposure noise reduction, I leave to on. It is the best image quality, but it does slow the camera down a bit. There is a handy dandy table in the menu. Basically, if you're at low ISO, anything shorter than 7 seconds, I believe, the noise reduction doesn't kick on. What it does do if it's on is it does a same length exposure. So let's say I do 10 seconds at base ISO with long exposure noise reduction turned on, also known as LENR, whatever, you might see that abbreviation. It will take a 10-second dark exposure, meaning there's no image and it's just the first picture goes, and then another 10 seconds later, it does noise reduction, and then you can shoot another picture. So yes, a 10-second exposure might take you 20 seconds, 30 seconds will take you a minute. It doubles your time. But if you don't do it, you can get speckles and hot pixels and things like that that are not so easy to remove in post-processing. It's not as easy as just noise reduction because it's not uniform noise.
Next.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're gonna have to. I don't want to. I hate that we're having to rush because I feel like it goes against not my philosophy.
Yeah.
I think we can do a part 2 and then also just talk more about the Q3 if we want. Maybe we'll do. What about like part 2 and then we also the second half of that show I go over all the Q3 accessories because there's like a million of them. That could be fun. Ooh, I don't know. I'll do my best. Okay.
I know, but we're gonna do 50 Lux next.
No, 50 Lux is like October, November.
Oh,
not the September show. Let's just keep going and see what kind of progress we make. But I don't want to rush.
We don't want to rush.
You guys are paying good money for this.
They're not.
You
paying
don't know
anything.
it yet.
They're not paying anything.
No, the invoice is in the mail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, $1,500.
Each.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, David. What is next? Customized control. You're gonna go. You're gonna talk
I'll
about
do it.
Okay.
Yep. Let's do it. All right. So customized control. This is a pretty deep menu. So we're gonna plow right through.
Okay.
Edit favorites. This is a great function. So this is Leica kind of being reactive because a ways back, and I forget what camera it was and what firmware it was.
The fact that you had to say a ways back means this is not going to be quick.
Basically, they used to have a limited number of of options that you could enable or disable for a lot of this stuff. Now it's very easy. They give you everything, but now you can toggle whether you want to see these on or off. As far as the favorites menu, if you leave this everything in here off, there is no favorites menu. If I just turn one of these things on, let's just turn one thing on. Now when I go into menu, you'll see the quick menu, and I push menu again, and now there's a favorites menu. So you see the quick menu icon and you see the little star icon. That's your favorites menu, and then one. So anything you put as an on in that favorites selection will show in the quick menu.
And one of the cool things is that you can have a favorites menu for each user profile.
You can.
So you can really, really customize the camera very comprehensively by using a combination of all the settings, favorites menu, custom buttons, and then storing them in different user profiles.
Right. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the favorites because most of the things that I need are in the quick menu. And then usually other things I would get to in the regular menu, or like Josh is suggesting, I would just create a user profile that brings up the right things.
Yeah.
Or I would assign a custom function button to that function. I find any of those things to be more convenient than having another layer of menus. So for me, I appreciate the default behavior of everything being off in favorites. Function button 1, we can also, this is more the toggling of selection.
Yeah,
So
this is a little bit confusing
it's not,
to explain.
right, it's not enabling that as the custom function. Those aren't all the custom function, even though they're set to on. By default, they're giving you all of these options that you can set the custom function to by pressing and holding. If you turn ones that you're like, I'm never going to look at that, you turn it off and you can simplify that particular assignable custom function button, which means, let's say I only ever want 5 options for that. I only want ISO, exposure compensation, self-timer, exposure bracketing, whatever, and that's it, and white balance. Okay, so I have those options enabled as on. Everything else I've turned off. Now when I go to set that custom function button, I don't have to scroll through 5 pages of items. It just simplifies setting a custom function button.
Perfect.
And that was the big change that they made.
Yeah.
If you want to set a custom function button, all you have to do is push and hold that button, and you'll see FN button 1, which is what we just talked about. And because all of those options are set to on, you'll notice I'm scrolling through literal pages of options.
So many.
I don't need all of these things,
Yeah.
okay? So when we go into that customized control function button, and let's say that I turn all of these off, I'm just going to turn a lot off. Not all of them because it's going to take too long. I do wish there was a set all to off option at the top or bottom of the menu. I don't know why there isn't. Okay, so I just turned off most of these. Okay, now when I go back here and I push the function button, push and hold,
That's the wrong one.
that's FN1.
Oh, did you set 1? Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you said 2.
So you'll notice instead of 6 or 7 pages, now there's 3 pages.
Nice.
Okay, obviously I didn't really pay attention to which I was turning off, but now let's say I want this to be EVF LCD. Now when I push it to activate it, that switches the modes between auto. Right now it's LCD on. Okay, now it's in auto, and now it'll switch. But you can change these, and we didn't really talk about that, but you can change these to whatever you want. So let's say I set that to digital zoom, and now you'll notice the next time I use it, it's set to digital zoom. Okay, that is function button 1. We have function button 2 is here. So you see FN button 2. So we got 1. Let me catch the light with that. Okay, we got function button 1, function button 2, and I believe, can we use the middle button? Yes. So then the center button is also assignable right here. And the top of the camera inside the control wheel, if I push that, better.
I think you have
there
it.
we go. Now it's thumb wheel button. So when I go back into my customized control, you'll notice I have FN button 1, FN button 2, center button, thumb wheel button, and then we also have, and these are all the same, just on or off in terms of the ability to quick set those options. Then we have wheel assignment, which is your thumb wheel, to auto exposure compensation or ISO. Josh, you want to explain exactly what those options are?
Yeah, you can keep David's screen up. It's fine. So essentially, if you have it on auto, the thumb wheel, David, can you point to that on the top right of the thumb wheel? That. If you have it on auto, if you're in any of these semi-automatic mode, or if you're in aperture priority mode or program mode, it's going to act as exposure compensation. The reason that I like auto is because you may say, oh, well, I want everything to be exposure compensation. The problem is, if you're working in shutter priority mode or manual mode and you want access to those third stop shutter speeds that David was showing you guys earlier, if you have it set to exposure compensation, you have to go into the quick menu to access those third stop speeds. If you have it set on auto and you're in either shutter priority or you're in manual, the thumb wheel becomes the third stop shutter speed setting. So
as you can see here.
Yeah, so if you're never going to use those third stops and you only want to have exposure compensation, that's fine. But just be aware that if you set it to exposure compensation and you want to access those third stops, you have to do it from the quick menu. That's all.
Right. So
Go back to that screen again.
There we go. Hopefully that is clear.
Yeah. So off disables the thumb wheel completely. Auto changes the behavior depending on the setting that you're in, which is the setting I like. Exposure compensation and ISO basically mean that's the only thing it's going to do regardless of where you're at. The thing is, because you have a custom button inside of that wheel, I would just set the custom button to be ISO.
Exactly.
And
which I think is the default behavior.
You're good.
Yeah. So I believe the default. Yeah.
Yes.
So the default behavior is when you push that, it is ISO, and then you can actually use the dial itself to adjust the ISO, which is super handy because that means that you have aperture, shutter speed, and ISO just with a single click to enable the wheel to be ISO. Otherwise, let's say I'm in A mode, my preferred method of shooting. Now, that is exposure compensation, which you can clearly see. And if I need to adjust ISO, I just click. So I've got all four of my major exposure controls: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and exposure compensation, all at hand without ever having to go into a menu.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Like, I like the way you just explained that, right? Because you have now the things you need.
Pillars.
The things you need.
The things you
at
need.
your fingertips. And I think that's an underappreciated aspect of what the Q3 can do, or any of the Q cameras, but especially the Q3.
For sure. And then we have our digital zoom, which I activated using by default. FN1 is actually our digital zoom, but you can also set in the menu if you really want to work slower. Let's say that you don't want to accidentally hit that button, so you don't assign it to a custom function, but you just want to go out and shoot with 35. You can set it in the menu without any other physical button control, and that way you will just be set in 35. And what you'll see is a little crop box here, and in the corner it says 35. So that is why there's a set menu option, even though it's...
And it does tell you in the quick menu screen on the top left as well. Yeah, it says it right there.
Yep.
So you know where you're at.
You know where you're at. User profiles. You want to go over that?
Sure. So I've made this analogy many times before. User profiles are like the memory settings in your car. So for example, if you and your partner and one of your kids all drive your car, each of you is going to have a different way to have the driver's seat and the side view mirrors and maybe the steering wheel and maybe whatever. Well, your car can store all the different drivers. So as soon as you sit down and you press the one button on the seat or whatever, all those settings are brought to your preference because the car remembers it and stores it. User profiles are the same idea. The camera is storing all of the current settings in a little file that lives in the camera, which you can bring up, you could recall whenever you want. So because there are so many options in between menu settings, custom functions, custom buttons, all these little things you could change, you're going to find that if you're shooting certain types of things consistently, that you'll develop certain settings you're always changing for those different environments. Maybe you have one for street photography, one for landscape, one for family, one for pets, whatever it may be. So instead of manually going into the menu or setting those things differently every single time, you can create user profiles that with a simple access in the quick menu or even a custom button, bring up all of those different settings you want to change in one shot. I think this is, and I've said this a million times, but it's one of the most underutilized but powerful aspects. And a lot of people think a user profile is only good if it has like 25 different changes. But the reality is even 2 or 3 changes in the menu that you're making a lot can take time if you're diving through all 6 pages, like we're desperately trying to do tonight. So even if it's just a matter of changing, the live view from color to black and white and your focus peaking from green to red, you can have a user profile just for those 2 changes and everything else is the same. And still, that's faster than diving into the menu and trying to find all those different settings. So
absolutely.
The camera, here we go, user profile, 6 different profiles that you can store. As I mentioned earlier, the default profile, if you select that, it brings the camera back to factory defaults. But let's say I wanted to make one change. I'm just going to turn auto review to 5 seconds. This is just for the sake of this demonstration. Go to user profile. I'm going to go to the bottom, manage profiles, save as profile. I'm going to save it under user 1. And now, if I go back to my user profiles, I can click on user 1, and that's going to bring up whatever settings I made in the camera before I saved it as user 1. I could even rename this profile. If I go back into manage profiles, rename user 1, I can name this anything that I want. So you could have one called street. You could have one called landscape, pets. I'm going to call this one Enzo just for fun. Who's asleep under the table. So you could have up to 6 different configurations, 6 different memory settings profiles for the camera that you can instantly recall. The fastest way that I find to do it is actually right here in the quick menu. You can see now I can scroll through default or Enzo, and I would see all 6 here if I had all different profiles made. So user profiles are extremely powerful. You can also export them to a memory card. So this is actually a way to get more than 6. Let's say you have 12. You can export 6 to maybe like a 2 gig SD card you have floating around, leave that in your bag, and then you can bring that in and bring all the new 6 profiles in. So if we go to export profiles right here, and I say yes, it's going to save a little text file to the memory card on the camera. And then if I import, it brings in those profiles. I'll mention that it does overwrite everything. So if you had 4 profiles in the camera, but you only exported to the memory card back when you just had 1, and you re-import, it's going to overwrite all of them and just have the 1 that was there before. So that's important to remember. But this is a really, really nice way if you're going to send the camera for service and you know they're going to reset it, or if there's new firmware and the camera's going to reset, to store all of your current settings, even if it's just one user profile, which is the settings you use the most.
Yeah. All right.
Josh is always in a hurry. Like, he doesn't want to be there, but there's better things to do. Wow. First of all, if I wouldn't be here for 2 hours giving you guys, I say free, but I'm going to charge you later. No, I think the challenge for us is David has a lot to say that's good and useful, but he's not good at metering it.
Well, see, that's why you need to come on a trip with me, so I have a full week to explain everything to you.
He has a lot of wisdom to share.
I have a lot of wisdom.
A lot. Yeah. Too much for the 2 hours. Too much. So I basically the foil for that. So my job is to poke him and prod him and be like, we got to move on, because as much as we would like to be here for 7 hours on a Saturday night after working all week.
Now, in the sake of moving forward, I was looking ahead. There's really not that much left.
All right, I say we keep going. I feel good.
If you guys are okay with going a little over time,
I think
we are going to finish this out.
Well, clearly they are. Clearly this gentleman or person is.
Yes.
So now when we go to midnight Eastern time, that's on you. Whatever your username is.
We're not going to midnight.
Duns. Okay.
Right. We're gonna knock this out.
Okay. So anyway, user profiles, import, export, share them with people. If you have a friend that has a Q3, you can send them that little text file from the memory card.
But it will overwrite all their stuff.
Yes. It's a mean thing if they don't know that. Anyway, I love user profiles. All the current Leica digital cameras have them. They all work pretty much the same way, where you can name them, manage them, and export
them. And no, they are not cross-compatible between cameras.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would be awesome, but no. Okay. So moving on.
What's next?
This one's a pretty easy one on this camera.
Okay.
So it's a lot harder on the SL2. It's really easy on here.
Okay.
So capture assistance, really simple. You've got a grid, your clipping or zebra, level gauge, and histogram. I'm a big fan of the grid. That gives you a compositional little overlay, which looks like that. Oh, sorry, I'm in 35, which is really funny. Like, it makes the grid.
Cute.
I know, it's so
so
cute.
tiny.
So it makes the grid. There you go. So that gives you a grid. I like it because it allows me to line up horizontal or vertical lines, rough rule of thirds, super helpful. Then clipping, highly recommend leaving this on because clipping is going to show you those blown highlights. What that looks like in practice, I'm going to put this into, there you go.
Nice.
Okay, those,
The blinkies.
the blinkies. You see that black blinking area? That equals bad. That equals unhappy David. So, don't do that. Here you can see I've got a little bit and now none at all. Okay?
Oh, I still, there you go.
There. Okay?
Nice.
None at all. So also you can see I've got a histogram up, which is also helpful. Not entirely necessary, but I'll show you that. You can turn on and off here, which will give you the histogram in the corner. And level gauge, I also find really useful. That gives you your little,
Reflections there.
well, I need to tip it a little
Oh,
bit.
okay.
Yeah. So you see
there
the little
go.
green line, turns red, okay, and shows when you're level. Because most photographers seem to have one leg that's longer than the other, and your pictures are always like beep that way. So just good to have this. And anything that you see here on the LCD is going to show in the EVF as well. So this is going to be mirrored inside here. Okay. That is capture assistance. So I do recommend leaving these on because they're super, super helpful. Play mode setup. I actually am not entirely sure what group display mode is.
I bet David doesn't know what that means.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Go
Group
ahead.
display mode. I know this really well because it used to be on by default in the original Q.
Yeah.
If you take a burst of images, what it does
Oh,
is it
right.
stacks
Yeah,
them
yeah,
all
yeah.
together in a
Yep.
slideshow.
Annoying.
So you're in playback and you'll see like a blurry image and it says play on it, like a play button.
I don't like that.
So if you want, no. So
Turn it off.
don't turn on group on unless you're doing tons and tons of bursts and you want to watch them all in some
Now
kind
I
of
know
weird
why
slideshow.
I don't remember because
it's
I,
super
I,
obscure.
I
Yeah.
completely blocked it
Yeah,
out
yeah.
because it was
As you should.
traumatic. Okay.
It's knowledge you don't need to have.
So turn this off.
Well, it's off by default, thankfully.
Leave it off.
Leave it off.
Leave it
yes,
off.
Yes.
Clipping, again, helpful for playback. Leave it on. Histogram, also helpful for good judging exposure. Leave it on. Okay? You don't have to really do anything there. And then display settings. These are helpful. I actually saw someone ask about the EVF LCD setting.
Let's not rush through this one.
No.
Sure.
So this one, we've got LCD, auto, EVF extended, and EVF. If you put it on EVF only, the screen's going to go blank. I just moved my menu into here. So that's everything. That means menus, live view, all of it is accessible only in the EVF. You can actually see it's on inside the viewfinder a little bit. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So you can see there's an image in the EVF. So to get that back, well,
You have to hold it up to your eye now.
oh gosh. Okay.
That's the downside of EVF only mode is that when you want to get back into any of the other modes, you have to do what David's doing, which is now this is an awkward in this situation if you're using it anyway.
It does look pretty awkward.
Okay. This is pretty awkward. Okay.
There we go.
Now I put it back in auto.
We got it.
You can also assign that to one of the function buttons as well to switch this up. And I know Josh has a very specific recommendation here in terms of this. So if you do auto, it's going to switch back and forth. Okay. If you put your eye up here, it will switch both in menus and in live view and playback. If you do LCD, it'll be stuck on the LCD. If you do EVF, it'll be stuck in the EVF like we just saw. Josh, what does EVF extended do?
So EVF extended, what that means is the live view, meaning that the image you're seeing and photographing is always in the EVF, but the menu and the settings will be in the EVF when you're looking through it and on the screen when you're not. So it's a way to avoid what David just had to do, which was to have to hold the camera up to look through the menu. It's smart enough to know that you're not using the eye sensor and will keep the menu on the screen.
Yes.
This is the way I use the Q3 the most because I don't often use it at arm's length with live view on the screen, and I don't necessarily want it to be switching back and forth all the time.
Right. That being said, I personally find auto to be more useful because we haven't actually done that yet. I am actually using the flip out screen.
Well, in EVF extended, the camera
Yes.
automatically switches to LCD mode when you extend the screen,
Ah.
which David can't stand and I like.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a hack if you're going to use EVF extended, but
Okay.
like David, you also want to take advantage of the tilting screen. The camera is, in my opinion, smart enough to know that as soon as the screen gets tilted in any way, even if you have EVF extended turned on, it'll redirect live view to the screen.
Which you can actually see right now, which if you do the
Can't
overhead.
see it because you don't have that camera view. There we go.
So if I put it in EVF extended and I put my hand up there as the sensor, you'll notice it still stays on there. Yeah. So, and in fact, with live view, it did switch. See?
What'd you do?
I put it into EVF again.
Okay. You're going to break it.
I'm going to break it. All right.
All right. We got to keep going. We're getting distracted.
Okay. So moving on here, we've got eye sensor sensitivity, which is if you find it to be too finicky with just moving close to it, you can turn it down to low. High is faster, which will make it quicker if you lift it up to your eye to switch, and you won't have as much lag.
High is actually, according to the manual, which I don't necessarily agree with, is it's technically designed for glasses wearers, so it doesn't need as much. Doesn't need to be as close to your eye.
Okay.
Not to contradict you, but
No, that's great.
From what because I was trying to figure this out today because
I'm learning something new.
Well, I never really played with that setting because I always just even on EVF extended, but
Sure.
according to at least what Leica says, the high is for glasses wearers and the low is for non-glasses wearers. So you got to try it out.
Wait, there are people who don't wear glasses?
It's myth.
Myth. Total myth.
Total myth.
Okay. So
Anyway.
moving on. We've got LCD brightness. I recommend just leaving it where it is. It's fine. It's plenty bright. And I think there's a little misnomer here. I find the same thing on laptop screens. I don't use auto brightness on laptop screens because I want a consistent image that I know how bright it is, regardless of what lighting conditions I'm in. So I always disable auto brightness on pretty much everything that I use because I just want to have a known brightness. So when I see an image on the screen, I know that I'm getting a consistent exposure.
Yeah.
And I think Josh would agree with the same thing.
100%.
Yeah.
These are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, and the same thing for EVF brightness. Again,
Well, there's no auto for EVF.
no,
right?
but just leave it as is. So middle of the road tends to be the most accurate. And you say, oh, I can't see it in bright light. Well, look through the EVF and you'll be able to see it plenty clear. Leica FOTOS.
Well, you missed.
What did I miss?
There's frame rate is at the bottom of the display settings.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have EVF frame rate, either 60 or 120 frames per second. I've tried both.
It's hard for me to really
can't
tell the difference. Yeah, I've like really tried, and maybe I just haven't used it enough. But I always leave it at 60, which is better battery life.
Same.
Yeah.
So I haven't found 120 to be a noticeable
I'd be
difference.
curious if anybody watching this that has a Q3 if they've seen a difference, like really practically, because
Right.
I am genuinely curious.
I have not seen a difference either, and I agree with Josh. If you use a lower refresh, you get slightly longer battery life.
Yeah.
And even if you're getting 10% better battery life,
I'll take it, yeah.
Take it.
Cool.
Okay. Moving on. Leica FOTOS. So this, if you go to pair, it's going to bring up that, and you would launch the Photos app on your phone and pair it here.
We will do an episode on the Photos app one day. I've been promising this for 3.5 years, but I promise we will do it.
That also gives you options for managing phone connections, so you could actually delete a paired device. And you can change the connectivity to be, because this does have Bluetooth LE, low energy, where it doesn't require a consistent Wi-Fi connection to be talking to the phone. But we need to talk about that in a completely separate episode.
Yeah.
Format card, pretty self-explanatory. Do you want to format the card? Yes or no?
That deletes everything on the memory card. So don't do that if there's important stuff in there. You want to talk about camera settings?
Yes. Go ahead, Josh. So then that's it.
That's it.
That is
Pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I feel good. I feel good.
We're doing it.
You know, I do have better things to be doing on a setting. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't. I don't know if people. We need to have like guest stars on the show so they can see what it's like under the lights. Camera settings. This is the last really important thing you're going to find, even though there's actually another couple of settings. And this is going to be sort of like the operational settings of the camera. So edit file name is a little bit silly because you can only actually change the first letter. I guess if you have more than one camera, this can be handy. If you're using Lightroom, it's kind of doesn't matter. Reset image numbering is going to reset the file naming back to 00001. Not sure why you would do that, but okay. Power saving, this is where you're going to describe how quickly the camera turns off during a period of not touching any buttons, and how quickly the displays in EVF just kind of power down but leave the camera on when you're not using it. I usually put these on the longest settings but it's just going to depend on the environment that you're in. We go now to acoustic signal. If you freak out when the camera rolls over into the electronic shutter mode because it's totally silent, you can actually assign a sound to the electronic shutter so that it does make a sort of simulated shutter noise.
iPhone-ish. Right.
Yeah, so it's actually can be cool if you don't need the silent aspect and you really do just want to be aware every time you're taking a picture. This is how you would do that. AF confirmation is it beeps when it activates the autofocus. I do know some people that like this, so you know what? If you do like that,
when it locks on autofocus.
yeah, sorry, when it locks autofocus, not when it activates, when it locks. And acoustic signals are things like when the memory card is full or when the camera is doing something and it beeps at you. I don't need that in my life, but this is where you would determine all the little cute noises the camera can make. USB charging, pretty self-explanatory. One of the new features on the Q3, it's like of the M11, is the camera does have a USB-C port on it. We talked about this during our Q3 episode. If you want the camera to charge over USB-C, you can turn this feature on. I don't really know why you would ever want to turn it off.
No, I would leave it on.
Yeah. Okay.
It's one of the cool features of the camera is the USB charging.
Yeah. USB mode, this is going to determine the camera's behavior when you plug it into something. So if you're using an iPhone or an iPad, you want it on the Apple MFI. Mass storage or PTP. Mass storage treats the camera like a hard drive. So if you just want to take the photos off, PTP is what you need for tethered shooting into Lightroom or Capture One. This is getting a little specific, but it's in the menu, and depending on what you're doing, you may need to change this setting.
Yeah, mass storage is cool because you could basically if you hook this up to your laptop with a USB cable, you can actually use it as a card reader, and you can use it to charge the camera at the same time.
That's cool. Yeah. So there you go. So if your battery's running low, and you don't have a card reader handy, so you want to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I mean, let's say, if you use like a MacBook Air, it doesn't have an SD card reader built in. So why not?
There you go.
Use the camera.
Camera settings, we finished USB mode. Now we're on to WLAN. This is going to be your Wi-Fi settings. There we go. I don't know. Now everyone knows my super secret Wi-Fi.
No.
This is randomly generated by the camera. So I can't say that I changed this, but there you go. The date and time, relatively self-explanatory. If you connect to the Photos app, it will ask you if you want to sync the date and time, which is nice.
Which is nice when you travel, for sure.
Yeah. Pixel mapping, if you're starting to see either any lines of dead pixels or like weird hotspots, like single pixel hotspots in your images, pixel mapping will basically scan for those and map them out. This only works when the sensor is cold. So like right now, I've had the camera on for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Pixel mapping is not going to work. You want to do it when you pick up the camera initially before you actually start using it. Otherwise, the pixel mapping feature does not function. So just a quick heads up. And it does do it on its own every 2 weeks. So the camera actually does a self-pixel map. You only would really do this if you started to see hot pixels.
It's pretty cool that it does that automatically.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's it for camera settings. I'll just cover the last couple.
Yeah, go for it.
Camera information is where you're going to update or view and also update your firmware version. You can also add copyright information in here if you want. So if I want to add an artist name, which would tag itself in the metadata of the files, you can do that as well. Some people will ask me where the copyright information is. It's buried in the camera information
Which makes no sense.
menu. I know. So, but really the reason you're going to go into this menu is to both view your firmware version and then update your firmware from this menu as well. And then language, pretty self-explanatory.
Yep. And reset
And
camera.
last but not least is reset camera. And when you do this, it will reset all the settings, the time, the date, user profiles, Leica looks, everything. This brings the camera back to the way it came.
Well, listen, there's a little bonus. There's a little bonus here, and I will show them that.
Yes.
You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to reset this one.
Okay.
So what do you get when you reset the camera?
Oh, like the fun little animation? Yeah.
Reset user profile? Yeah, I'm going to reset it. Yes, reset everything. Yes, just reset it all. All right, when I restart the camera, guess what? If you want to show off to your friends, be like, hey, check this out, and you turn it on for the first time, look what it does. There it is.
How fun.
Look at that.
Mesmerizing.
Ooh, ah.
Wow.
I mean, it's quite long, actually.
It's annoying.
And there you go.
Yes.
So, and then you have your opportunity to reset up the camera from scratch, from
Now,
factory.
Of course, we've done the menu, but there is something we haven't talked about, which is playback. I will quickly kind of but efficiently
Go.
discuss that.
Go for it.
You can come back to me. There's two ways to get to playback. You can either hit the play button, and that will bring you. Here's a picture I just took of the M11s in
That
front of me.
is so nice.
You can also swipe down from the top, and that will bring playback as well, depending on what you like. Playback experience is very similar to live view. The center button is going to either hide or show your various aids and information. You can double tap to zoom to 100% and scroll around, double tap to come back out. You can also turn the thumb wheel to zoom. You can also pinch to zoom, which I find a little bit
It's
clunky
limiting,
sometimes. The double tap is very convenient. And you can scroll, I'll take another picture here of this lovely cable. So you can use the directional pad to scroll, or you can scroll with your fingers. If you zoom out, you can view lots of images at once. Pretty straightforward, not a
think
lot
so.
of like secrets. I will mention I do never ever recommend deleting images in camera.
But if you have
I'm not
to.
even going to show you how to do it. Or
Really?
Menu.
Menu.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really easy. But David and I are not advocates of ever deleting in camera.
No.
So I know we're running late, but we should see if there's any questions we can address since we've already gone over.
I think we covered pretty much
Well,
everything
Jose,
in the camera.
is there anything in the chat like that we need to?
The only thing I realized that we didn't talk about was two different things on the camera,
Okay.
which is macro mode, which is pretty
We
self-explanatory.
covered that in the Q3 overview or episode. I
but
think.
just no.
Yeah, but you can still show them.
There's
Still
no
show 'em.
menu option.
Yeah.
You just turn it to macro mode.
Yeah.
There you go.
You do want to make sure that that ring is fully engaged, because if it's even slightly asunder
Like this.
like that, it will not.
it will
work.
not
The
function.
camera
In
doesn't work.
fact, it will say macro ring not in correct position.
Sometimes it only does it the first time. Well, you just
Oh.
reset the camera. Nice job.
well, whatever.
So okay, but anyway, make sure it's fully engaged
Yep.
position.
And the other one, it's still booting up. The other one is the diopter, which not everyone knows about. Let me just select. No.
Well, you don't need the
I know.
screen for that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So what does it say? Boom. There you go.
Well, it doesn't. We're not. Oh, there we go.
Macro ring, not
But it
in
only
correct
does that
position.
once.
Right. And then what happens is it'll show you that, but then you can clear it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, why doesn't it?
No worky.
Why no worky? Yeah. Why doesn't that work?
Yeah.
Well, because you don't have it in the position. It's not broken. You just need to make sure that's fully engaged.
Show the adapter.
Yeah. And the next thing is
The last thing. The last.
Yeah.
thing.
The last thing is the diopter correction, which is right here, and you have to push it in. Trying to get a good angle on that. There we go.
There you go.
And you turn it while you're looking through the EVF. Don't just do this without. And what's really neat is you dial it in, and then you click it back into position, and you can't accidentally mess it up.
Yeah.
So that's really nice.
Yeah.
But I would say that is just a little feature there. That's not a custom function button, even though it looks like one. Don't click it. Remember, you got your other function buttons here.
Yeah. Someone's asking to see our quick menu, but our cameras are in factory default right now.
We just
so
reset
it's
them
not
all.
going to help you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we sign off, are there any important questions that we definitely need to answer?
Can you disable the drawing of boxes over the eyes while still using eye detection autofocus?
No.
No. That would be a good suggestion.
The face eye detection is a really new feature for Leica, so I don't, or I do expect that we'll see continuing improvements and customization on that. But right now, it's just a matter of even just having it is a big deal.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And then what happened to installing new camera firmware updates directly using the Leica FOTOS?
You can.
You can do that. I mean, I never do that just because, I don't know. Maybe I just feel like it's slower or like I'm
Well,
suspicious.
I mean, I'll tell you the reality of the situation is, I mean, this is going to come off sounding not right, but I'm going to just say it anyway.
Fire away.
We have too many cameras, and putting them all in photos and keeping track of the serial numbers and everything. So like with multiple M's and Q's and SLs and all that.
But for you, the individual, well, some of these people have a lot of cameras, but it works fine. Either way, the key is I don't care how you update your
have
firmware.
like 5 SL2s though.
I don't care how you update your firmware. Just update it,
Yeah.
please.
Please.
Do it for
Josh.
Do it for
the
Enzo.
children.
Do it for
the
Enzo.
children.
He's under
Do
the
it for
table. He's
children.
sleeping. He's sad.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else, Jose?
When will you create a preset for the Q3?
Oh, see, this is what happens. David did presets once, like 3 years ago, and now everybody wants new presets.
I'll say what I'll actually give the same answer I gave in our last episode, which is I actually have not created a Q3 preset because I have had excellent luck using my M11 preset for the Q3.
But you haven't shared that either, so.
What's that over there?
Yeah, I don't know what the plan is for that. So for now, just accept the fact that he hasn't shared them and he may never. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're busy. You're traveling the world. You're educating people. You're doing the show. Like, I don't know what to say. It's just, we have, look, here's the thing.
Wait, we took the time, we put into the firmware update episode, or the firmware update article rather.
Presets are different though, because they're very subjective. We shouldn't talk about this right now.
They are very subjective.
We appreciate that you're enthusiastic enough about the image presets to continue to harass him about them, and we will take that under consideration when David decides that he has time to make more. How's that? We do. I mean, I know you like them, but we'll see. Leica just keeps there's too many cameras.
So many cameras.
Okay, I think we've done it. I mean, we'll be back next month probably.
Yes,
So,
but it may not be on a Saturday.
yeah, we don't know exactly. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we don't know what's going on in September. We're gonna do the 50 Sumolux episode either in October, November.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna do the Leica watches either November, December.
Mm-hmm.
So we have two really, really, really cool and gear-filled shows coming up. Again, if you have any really nice, special, unique, or vintage 50 Sumolux M lenses you're willing to loan us for that upcoming show, I would be super grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know. Why don't you sign us off?
All right. Wow. We did it. It took a little longer than expected, but
We did. A
we'd
little bit
rather-
of rushing here and there, but I think
listen.
we pretty good.
I think we've got it. And bear in mind, in the sometime future, we will be timestamping this so you can skip ahead to the menu option that interests you. Feel free to use this as a resource going forward to set up your Q3, whether you have it now or in the future, because not all of these things are super self-explanatory. And most people don't want to read the manual, so you can just watch this and you can get our tips and tricks here. If you have any questions about the video, please drop them in the comments after the video goes not live, but in archive in about an hour. And those will post permanently to the video and we can reply to those. If you leave it in the live chat, unfortunately, we can't reply to the live chat when we're not live anymore.
Yeah.
You can scroll through, though, on playback, and you can see the links that our colleague Lorena has dropped for us.
And I just wanted to talk for a second. We do have a full episode on the Q3,
We do.
all the features, how it compares to a bunch of other cameras.
Correct.
So if you want to know more about the camera and not about the menu, check out that show from about 2 months ago or so.
Absolutely. Because all of our live shows are archived. Just go in Red Dot Forum YouTube, go into the live tab. Instead of videos, go to live. It's confusing, but even though they're not live anymore, they were live at one point, and now they live there. So all the videos are archived, and they're also in playlists specific to the cameras. So you can find the Q3 in the Q playlist, Q system playlist, as well as this one. So you'll be able to find this video and others in the Q playlist. If you're interested in SL, M, monochrome, whatever, again, we have playlists for those too. And I think we're up to 60, blah, 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 blah,
Well more than 60 episodes.
So yeah, you can check those all out if you really have trouble sleeping and need help from a couple Leica nerds.
That's right.
Okay, I think that is it for us. Be sure to subscribe to Red Dot Forum on YouTube. Click the bell so you get notifications when we post new content. Stay tuned. We will be back in early September.
Sometime
in September with some cool stuff that you want to check out.
For sure.
Always
Super
keep
cool.
an eye on red.forum.com website, not on YouTube, for the latest Leica news, articles, firmware updates, etc. On there, because we post a lot more on the website than we do on YouTube. And yeah, and if you want to travel with us, check out the workshops that at Leica Store Miami, where you can join one of us or multiple of us's on these trips and learn in the field with your Leicas, and we get to shoot and have a lot of fun together. All right. Big thanks to Josh. Big thanks to Jose. Thanks to Lorena, who's not in the room, but by the miracle of the internet is also in the chat. Thanks, Lorena. Everyone say hello if you haven't already. And thanks to you guys for tuning in and bearing through a really exciting episode of menu walkthrough, because we know this is probably the most exciting part of your day.
Now Josh can go home. If you want to Uber Eats me some beers for after this.
Now Josh and
Text
Enzo
me.
can go home.
I'll be back tomorrow working again and Monday. So answering all your emails that you'll send me between now and tomorrow. tomorrow.
All right, back on track. Again, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you in the next episode.
Oh, and remember, we have 4 other menu episodes, 3 other menu episodes. Q2, M11, SL2. We've done episodes just like this for those cameras. So if you learned from this one and you have those other cameras, check out those shows because we really dove deep.
Yes, we continue to dive deep.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of your Saturday night or whenever you're watching this. And yeah,
See you next time.
happy photography, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.